James Maury Henson was born in 1936, which was before television, and then television came out and the world was never the same.
Oh, well, I've got a dream too. But it's about singing and dancing and making people happy. That's the kind of dream that gets better the more people you share it with.
They formed what people in Washington now know as the Muppets. A little different than a puppet. And you folks in Washington, D.C. know them very well. They've been appearing there over WRC-TV for 2.5 years.
In 1950, Jim Henson got a hold of a probably tiny-ass television. Jimmy loved the telly. Jimmy wanted to be seen on that probably tiny-ass television. In 1954, he saw a job opportunity to be a puppeteer for segments on a short-lived Washington, D.C. local Saturday morning children's show. But he was a minor at the time, and that show got canceled for violating child labor laws. But even if Jimmy was out of a job, that didn't matter because he got work elsewhere. This man was such a gangsta that he called his puppets Muppets and just altered the spelling and everyone complied. Big pimpin'. Speaking of pimpin', he met Jane Neville in college and he was getting pussy, but not until 1959. She helped develop Muppet skits benefiting the hustle, with their next segments being a part of a variety program simply titled Afternoon. But then their next big break was Sam and Friends, starring Sam and his friends, one of which is like this weird turquoise monster. Most of Sam and Friends consist of lip-syncing to pre-existing songs with special effects, although there are original covers, sketch segments, and sponsorship segments as well.
Oh, black magic has me in a spell. Oh, black magic that you weave so well.
By 1956, the Muppets were enough of a spectacle to appear on TV beyond DC. First on the Steve Allen Show, a big dog talk show of the time. Afterward, Jim and Jane would create advertisements, which you may recognize because they've been taken out of context a lot on the internet. These advertisements were for Wilkins Coffee. They're notable for their practical slapstick, starring the duo of Wilkins and Wontkins. Wilkins likes Wilkins coffee, but Wontkins won't drink Wilkins coffee. Wilkins will often proceed to commit first-degree murder towards Wontkins' distaste.
Okay, buddy, what do you think of Wilkins coffee? I never tasted it. Now, what do you think of Wilkins?
But the part the internet goes apeshit over is seeing Kermit kill somebody, but that's not Kermit. Wilkins is a copy-paste of Kermit from Sam and Friends with a similar design and voice. It's often put into the context, early Kermit killed people? But Kermit had already existed as a friend of Sam. This is ancient, and the company they were designed for was a local brand and went out of business in 1992. So congrats, now you know the context behind Kermit killed people in the 50s videos. At the time, Jim and Jane got married and had a child, with a developing ambition to possibly go bigger than talk shows in Washington, D.C. After the couple's first child, Lisa, Jane would take a step down from consistently puppeteering for motherhood, although she did remain a creative consultant, a background Muppet performer on Sesame Street up until the 80s, and a talent recruitant for Jim. So Henson had to find other puppeteers, and over the following years, he was able to network with others and assembled a crew of Frank Oz, Dave Goelz, Jerry Nelson, Carol Spinney, Jerry Jewell, and Richard Hunt. Jerry Jewell is an overlooked figure in the Muppet lore because he was not actually a puppeteer, but he was the head writer of countless Muppet projects throughout his life. So the team hit the Big Apple and made more commercials and failed television pilots. Another reoccurring mascot around the time was the Purina Dog Chow mascot Rolf, with his sidekick Baskerville. For a brief period of 1962 to 1963, the duo had a similar dynamic to Wilkins and Wontkins, but without the violence since these are puppy dogs. Both characters in the commercials were voiced by Henson. The duo utilizes Henson's two main voices, with the high-pitched talking voice and the gravelly voice.
Now, Baskerville, in this commercial, when I say, chow time, you leap from the package and run towards the camera, right?
Right.
Okay. Lights, camera, chow time! Cut! Now what's the trouble, Baskerville?
I'm hungry.
Which you may notice Henson would proceed to use a lot and would become the standard for Rolf and Kermit's voices. Get ready to hear those two voices a lot. Rolf would later be a singer on the Jimmy Dean Show. Yes, the microwavable egg sandwich guy. But now it's the 60s and the civil rights movement was in full swing, and an activist named Joan Gaz Cooney discovered the local Muppet crew.
What you eating? A sandwich made with Clausen's bread. Want a bite? Sure.
the only Muppet crew. During the Civil Rights Movement, Cooney was known for New York's first ever children's educational channel. She saw the potential in utilizing the mainstreaming of television to teach lessons to children. Cooney liked Henson and Company's unique ability to market, and she figured, why not create advertisements of educational concepts, selling letters and numbers instead of bread and coffee.
Give me some party line coffee. How about some Wilkins, comrade? That's capitalist coffee, you traitor. Send 2 pounds to the back door.
But getting this epic Cooney-Henson collab took a while and a whole lot of cheddar. So in the meantime, Henson and Company created a trilogy of TV specials, being comical retelling of fairy tales. This trilogy is now referred to as Tales from Muppet Land, the first of which being Hey Cinderella in 1969. The trilogy featured everybody's favorite turquoise monster thing named Kermit, but this time as a frog, parodying The Princess and the Frog in multiple instances. This Frog Kermit parody variant became permanent. The trilogy also introducing Robin the Frog, Sweetums, and the Muppet Chickens. These goofy Muppets sure were good at getting children's attention, but Henson desired a position to use the Muppets for a more adult demographic.
This children's television workshop show because us Muppets are going to be on it every day.
Hold it. Okay, hold everything here. Wait a minute. Cool it. What was that last part?
I said that us Muppets are going to be part of the children's television workshop TV show.
But Cooney wanted the Muppets to be included in the exact opposite place, as residents of Sesame Street, a show she was trying to get off the ground. Amongst the creation of new characters, Kermit would also appear as a resident and in the pitch reel to get the show off the ground, along with Rolf the dog.
Why don't you call your show Sesame Street?
My entire career as a TV educator nipped in the...
New characters created for the show included Ernie, Bert, Cookie Monster, Big Bird, Count Von Count, and Oscar the Grouch. But those characters were just for the Muppet segments of the show. Given the show's civil rights creator background, it included diverse realism and an inner-city setting, attempting to combat many poor literacy rates in ethnic backgrounds at the time. The inner-city blues was free to watch on television, creating a form of free education and entertainment, a progressive standard for television at the time, which given the culture wars it inevitably faced critics. However, there was one pro-representation controversy, the Muppet Roosevelt Franklin. Roosevelt Franklin is one of the few obscure Muppets that was intentionally abandoned rather than progressively phased out. Roosevelt Franklin was played by Matt Robinson, the original actor for reoccurring human resident Gordon.
Where is that Roosevelt Franklin?
Somebody call me by my first and last name.
Yes,
And he speaked in jive and educated his fellow classmates about black history. The segments were kind of blaxploitation-ish.
Who knows what Africa looks like?
I do. I do too. I know everything. I know all about Africa. It's a jungle, just one big jungle. I know because I saw it all in the Tarzan movie.
A Tarzan movie.
Will you listen right?
Wrong.
A more prominent genre of the 70s that some deemed as black empowerment and others deemed as harmful. He was popular enough to get merchandise, including the first Sesame Street Muppet solo album, which excludes other cast members and multi-character albums. This arguably created a bad behavioral example with the use of jive talk and scatting frequently in songs.
Man, I'm too cool to cry. Well, yeah, I can dig that. But how is anybody gonna know that you really hurt?
And after 7 seasons, he disappeared. The segments aren't malicious, and Elmo's English was way more broken and was also played by a black guy originally, Kevin Clash. So I wouldn't be surprised if Elmo was also abandoned if he was introduced in the 70s. On the less controversial side, Sesame Street is not ridiculously filled with kooky crap either. The ghetto setting is realistic enough and is a laid-back product of its time. It's a 70s show in the best way possible. The charm, practical craftsmanship, and consideration towards its demographic in the first 20 years or so is unmatched. As an adult, it's great to watch in small pieces on YouTube. The Kermit and Cookie Monster scenes reoccurring throughout season 1 are comedy gold.
That's how mad I am.
Oh, Froggy!
And furthermore, I'm gonna tell your mother on you.
Oh, not my mommy!
Mother, and your mother's not gonna let you come here anymore.
Froggy, please, Froggy, not my mommy.
I'm gonna tell your mommy.
Oh, I'd be so sad.
You're gonna be sad?
So sad if you tell my mommy. So sad.
You really be sad?
One of my favorite bits this is the sketch The Great Cookie Thief from Season 2, a sketch about teaching identification.
No, not same person. No.
Oh, yeah?
No.
Well, just look up at that wanted poster there. See there? That's
nice.
A picture of the Great Cookie Thief. He's got big bobbly eyes and blue shaggy fur and a big western hat. Looks just exactly like you.
Yeah, you're right, but not have same mustache.
Mustache?
Yeah.
You ain't got no mustache.
The show in its earlier years is also known for a handful of what the f*** segments.
You think she'd at least take us for a walk or something?
You want to play ball, Wanda?
No. Here we go again. Boy, you know it. Another afternoon with cookie crumbs falling all over us.
It was made by hippies. What do you expect? Just a giant rabbit chasing children. Like, what was the point of that? Was that even finished? Can't forget Count to 10 with Nobody, a sketch reincorporating Henson's string puppet Muppet Nobody.
Over the years, I've been able to organize. Now, in this part of my brain, for instance, I keep thoughts about my family.
Yeah, let's make that PG and make him count to 10. Who cares if he smacks his lips like a serial killer in the original short?
And we will try to count how many dots go by. 1, 2, 3.
Lots of early episodes aren't widely available. Due to the total runtime and its availability, it's one of those rare shows you can't finish. From the first 8 years, there are 53 episodes currently considered lost, seasons 2 and 3 both having over 20 missing episodes. And even if a handful are only documented as missing, good luck actually gathering the rest of the 4,600 plus to view. However, one since recovered lost episode was an urban legend turned former lost media holy grail. The Wicked Witch episode, episode 847 from 1976. The episode consisting of segments with the late Margaret Hamilton reprising her role as the Wicked Witch of the West from the Wizard of Oz 1939 film, 37 years after the film's release, losing her broom on Sesame Street and attempting to get it back. In this crossover, these sketches encourage respect and cooperation, given that the witch is wicked.
See, look, why don't you get out of here?
Not without my broom!
No, you can't have your broom until you show me a little respect.
Who says?
I say!
David...
The episode was banned for being too scary as a result of complaints from parents, although the outrage could be more attributed to the presence of witchcraft rather than frightening imagery. But once the internet got a hold of it, it was no urban legend. One promotional photo of Hamilton with Oscar the Grouch being available for as long as the internet. Due to it being outright banned pre-internet, the possibility of frightening imagery made it desired. It was an elusive piece of documented lost media. It was no urban legend. And I have to admit, as somebody who had been following others' efforts to try to find it for years, as it was a holy grail lost media even more than Peppermint Park Volume 6, when it was found, there was nothing really scary about it. Yeah, there's a green witch, but that was satanic in a lot of parents' views, probably. Carol Spinney himself said it was one of his favorite episodes, which is a bold claim considering he worked on Sesame Street for 49 years and the public can't even watch it. But you want to know who thought this controversy was completely f***ing stupid? Mr. Rogers.
It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor.
Margaret Hamilton got to appear on multiple episodes of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Rogers had the advantage of producing episodes in quick succession to response of recent world events that may affect children. Given that the show consisted of mostly just discussion, it allowed for quicker episode production, the first season alone having 130 episodes. Topics like war were discussed shortly after the United States invasion of Grenada in 1983, racial inequality in 1969, shortly after the Civil Rights Movement, 9 days after the Wicked Witch visited Sesame Street on air.
One of the movies that she played in was called The Wizard of Oz, and she played the part of the Wicked Witch of the West.
Margaret Hamilton was brought onto the show in an attempt to teach the differences between fiction and reality, showing Hamilton with and without her costume, emphasis on costume. But for 1970, Sesame Street was the biggest hit for the Muppets yet. But it wasn't the Jim Show, it was the Cooney Show, with the bread and butter created by Jim and friends. In 1970, the Henson Company premiered the special The Great Santa Claus Switch, which was acclaimed at release, but is more well known for its precursors it's created. The villains minions of the Frackles and the design of the cigar box Frackle.
These other assorted evil-looking characters around here, these are my Frackles. I'm pleased to meet you.
Are you really Santa Claus?
Yes, I am. Would you like old Santa Claus to bring you something for Christmas?
No, I'd like a baseball mitt.
Well, have you been a good boy?
Sesame Street continued to immortal success, but what wasn't successful was an intended Muppet Broadway musical. Investors continuously rejected the idea on the basis that Sesame Street, a preschool show, was successful, viewing the Muppets for preschoolers only, meaning that Sesame Street's success was simultaneously the best and worst thing to happen to the Muppet team yet. Since the Broadway show went nowhere, the team went back to television to try and get a weekly Muppet show off the ground. A pilot was successfully funded thanks to a then nobody, Michael Eisner, a foreshadowing of the horror to come. This pilot was a special titled The Muppet Valentine Show, taking notes from Sesame Street with the variety format of short skits. Hosted by Wally, a screenwriter with his team of wacky Muppets, most of which are familiar faces up until this point. Additionally, guest starring actress Mia Farrow, often recognized for her short marriage to Frank Sinatra. The special was well received and created the potential of more Muppet holiday specials beyond Valentine's Day. Being given more work, the Muppets got to appear on the Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass self-titled TV show featuring a new character, Miss Piggy.
Stick figure. She's a pretty foxy-looking young lady. You know what I mean, Herbie, huh? Piggy, come on in here, Piggy. Herbie, I'd like you to meet Piggy. Piggy doll, this is Herbie, baby. This is your letter to success, Piggy doll. I've been telling him all about you.
Hello, Mr. Alpert.
Beautiful, beautiful.
But with the Muppet Show pilot/special, there was a further attempt of trying to be successful while being different from Sesame Street. The next pilot was titled The Muppet Show Sex and Violence, hosted by a new Muppet, Nigel. Sex introduced some notable new characters, including the Swedish Chef, Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem, Sam the Eagle, and Statler and Waldorf. Big Bird, Kermit, Rolf, and Bert would additionally make cameos. Kermit and Rolf's appearances being crucial to the next iteration. Yo, it's Charlie! The special was poorly received in terms of audience reception and didn't disprove the main thing that got the previous specials nowhere. The Muppets are for preschoolers, punk. But the team didn't listen, and they were given another opportunity to appear on Saturday Night Live, an upcoming comedy series parodying American culture, socially and politically. The Muppet segments were titled The Land of Gorch, these Muppets featuring a much more complicated and grotesque designs. The actual Land of Gorch segments were written by SNL writers and not Jerry Jewell and Company, leading to poor reception of these characters not really acting like Muppets regardless of the mature aspects of the source material.
Says, P.S. Be mine tonight, your slave in love, Scred. And then down at the bottom it says, P.S. XXXX.
The aspects of song covers was continued. The Gorch Muppets would often interact with the celebrity host of each SNL episode. On the first season of SNL, the Land of Gorch Muppet segments would appear in 17 of the 24 episodes, then never again, further cementing the executive consensus that the Muppets were for preschoolers, punk. But a producer named Lou Grade saw a potential in the Muppets not being for preschoolers, leading to the Muppet Show.
It's the Muppet Show with our very special guest star, Shirley Bassey.
Heavily taking notes from the previous two pilots, each episode being built around a very special guest getting to interact with the puppets through sketches and song. The Muppets still having an intention to appeal to adults, but this intention shifted to include the target audience of all ages to retain a balance between preschoolers and parents. Sesame Street has a ton to appreciate as an adult, but preschoolers are the target demographic at the end of the day. This neutral approach allowing the appeal of Sesame Street and the intended appeal of the previous failed Muppet subsequent mature projects. The Muppet Show cast would essentially be a greatest hits compilation of pre-existing characters with some new additions, including new iterations of pre-existing characters like the cigar box Frackle making his debut as Gonzo the Great, also marking the debut of Scooter and Fozzie Bear. Nigel would be downgraded from host to an orchestra conductor without prominent focus, but creating the right host would be integral to succeeding with the concept. Nigel's role would be so heavily reduced that in the special guest Juliet Prowse episode, there's a sketch where Kermit is conducting a choir and not the theater conductor, Rolf and Kermit being the two oldest and most popular Muppets featured on the show. Kermit was chosen as the main host, Kermit already having a most notable role as a resident of Sesame Street, often being placed with Cookie Monster. Kermit being different from Bert, who was aggravated but tolerated Ernie's shenanigans.
Thirsty. All right. One more glass of water.
Oh, Bert.
One more glass of water.
And Oscar, who showed no sign of ever not being upset. Kermit also had a recurring role as Sesame Street news reporter.
Kermit the Frog! Bill Cosby! What are you...
Satirizing news station programs allowing the teaching of emotions. Kermit had the tendency to display disciplinary anger towards Cookie Monster, often benefiting the informative concepts of the sketches relating to emotion.
Now you can tell I'm mad by the kind of things that I say to the monster, like this. You big fat stupid rotten monster! You make me so mad I don't believe it!
One of the most famous Muppet songs, Bein' Green, written by Joe Raposo for Kermit on Sesame Street, has an emotional edge to it, where over the course of the song, Kermit displays his insecurities towards his appearance. Through self-reflection, Kermit acknowledges his green appearance and he is insecure that he's not a more vibrant color, but then identifies the positive aspects of the color, and begins to appreciate those positive aspects in spite of the flaw of lack of vibrance in some scenarios, simplifying the physical and emotional insecurities into colors that we may have, flawlessly executing the moral of appreciating one's unique aspects in a way that a child could understand. The substance of Kermit's emotions had him be way more multidimensional than many of the other Sesame Street Muppets, being emotional to teach emotion, so why not use this popular emotional character for comedy?
I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Piggy. I'm going to fire you. Piggy, you are fired. You are fired. Piggy, you are fired. Fired. You're kidding. I am not kidding.
Fitting the opportunity for adult appeal by not oversimplifying characters. Kermit's personality being retained and here trying to maintain the management of various zany vaudeville acts. Rolf, being an established and popular character prior, also got his own segments, unlike Valentine's and Sex. Over the next 5 seasons, given that the show often focused on a vaudeville show within a show, the guests on most but not all instances had musical backgrounds, including notable recording artists and notable musical actors. Technically being similar to many of the musical variety hours with the twist of starring puppets called Muppets. Taking another note from Sam and Friends, the musical segments were covers often with a twist relevant to the narrative of what was being covered. One of my favorite segments is Janice's cover of The Beatles' With a Little Help from My Friends. The twist here is that the song is used as a cry for help with the electric mayhem rather than a declaration of gratitude. While being held hostage by an ancient creature, changing the song genre combined with the technically impressive and absurdist imagery makes for a funny and unique repurpose, and the show does this constantly. Not all the musical segments are super absurd, but the more simple ones are typically still funny. The cover of Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover has no practical ape shit stuff, but Rizzo on the cymbals just looks so f***ing stupid that it's hilarious.
Are you sure it isn't 50 Ways to Love Your Lever?
Positive.
Oh, sorry, Paul.
Many of the musician guest episodes feature semi-new versions of pre-existing songs, the inclusions of Muppets for a new take. Sometimes doing Muppet duets, Muppet backing vocals, or just doing a verse. Really just making Muppetized music videos of familiar tunes. The show had a share of gimmick episodes often built around the very special guests. The Vincent Price and Alice Cooper episodes having more horror-themed episodes. The Loretta Lynn episode having the vaudeville shenanigans being unexpectedly restricted to performing in a train station.
Do you know who's conducting? The conductor.
the Lynn Redgrove episode having a medieval setting, the Brookie Shields episode being a Alice in Wonderland spoof, the Stars of Star Wars episode serving as a crossover episode featuring the Star Wars cast in character as well as Luke's cousin Mark Hamill. This is a funny parallel given that Frank Oz performed as Yoda in the upcoming event of the summer, The Empire Strikes Back, Henson originally being offered to play the role by George Lucas himself. And this was 1980, so Star Wars was a big deal, but not quite the entire pillar of pop culture that it is today, or at least before Disney got a hold of it. The episode features the Muppets and the Star Wars cast singing When You Wish Upon a Star from Disney's Pinocchio, a foreshadowing of the horror to come. Previously developed musical sketch formats were also included. The cover of Phenomena, originally from the film Swedish Heaven and Hell, had been previously performed on Sesame Street Season 1 and The Ed Sullivan Show, having a more developed version of the visuals appear in the Juliet Prowse episode, as well as the Muppet Country trio of Jim, Frank, and Jerry being self-inserts of Jim Henson, Frank Oz, and Jerry Nelson, which had previously appeared on the Dick Cavett Show and Sex and Violence. Season 1 had actress Candice Bergen as guest star, but by Season 2, Candice's father, who was part of the most notable ventriloquial duo of all time, Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, appeared as guest stars, a testament to the success of the first season by the end of its run, the episode serving as a crossover between two notable puppet acts. During Season 3, one of the most important cast members, Steve Whitmire, joined the cast, playing many new additions, first appearing as the puppeteer for Thog in special guest Alice Cooper. Steve Whitmire claimed that he wrote to Henson when Sesame Street started airing, and he actually wrote back to this random 10-year-old. Continuing his intended profession, Whitmire would acquire the nickname Kermit while in high school. Motivated by that enthusiasm, his dream came true and he got to work with him, Steve playing Rizzo the Rat and Lips, the new member of the Electric Mayhem. Other beloved cast additions after Season 1 include Beaker, Lou Zealand, and Uncle Deadly. It's weird to think that Bunsen was originally designed without Beaker to interact with, unlike Ernie and Bert, considering how popular the duo became. Uncle Deadly didn't appear much after 1979, but the character has since gained a cult following amongst the Muppet cast, and is now popular enough to appear in more recent years and have his own social media accounts. Special guest Bernadette Peters marked the first instance of a reoccurring cover of Just One Person. The song was originally from Snoopy the Musical, based on the Peanuts comic strip that first debuted in 1975, which would later receive a TV special adaptation as the 35th Peanuts TV special. But the Muppets truly made the song famous in 1977, since it predates the official adaptation of Snoopy the Musical, which brought it to primetime TV. The song would later appear in a special Sesame Street Christmas in 1978, not to be confused with Christmas Eve on Sesame Street, also released in 1978. Yes, there were two Sesame Street Christmas specials released with similar titles in the same month. A special Sesame Street Christmas features the human cast trying to get Oscar to appreciate Christmas, not to be confused with A Sesame Street Christmas Carol, further not to be confused with The Muppet Christmas Carol. Just One Person would later be performed live on tons of instances, as well as Elmo getting a solo cover. It's a simple but great number about the positive impact you can have on others as a result of faith of oneself. One thing to note about the show is that it's never once fully been widely available. The show was syndicated for decades after its original run, so that was the primary way to watch it after its run. There was one VHS which was a compilation titled The Muppet Show Monster Laughs with Vincent Price, containing the title Stars episode and additionally special guest Alice Cooper to serve as sort of a horror compilation. Price and Cooper had coincidentally also worked together on Cooper's LP Welcome to My Nightmare. The VHS does remove the cover of The Beatles' I'm Looking Through You and Carole King's You've Got a Friend from special guest Vincent Price because of song copyright complications, in addition to Robin the Frog's solo cover of Judy Garland's Somewhere Over the Rainbow from The Wizard of Oz from the Alice Cooper episode was also removed from the tape. But in 2001, a series of greatest hit compilation VHSs were released, but this was still before the age of complete series and season box sets, and the entire series was not available on home media. But then the series would receive a DVD release of Season 1 in 2005, Season 2 in 2006, and Season 3 in 2004. And a Season 4 release was teased, but was cancelled, and nothing was ever conceived for Season 5. But then in late 2019, on Disney Plus, it became available to watch, but not every episode. Disney pulled special guest Chris Langham because in 2007 he was charged with possession of child sexual abuse material, and special guest Brooke Shields episodes were not available because of securing the music rights of We're Off to See the Wizard, also from The Wizard of Oz. There's also also a handful of documented missing scenes from other episodes because of other copyright complications. Season 1 obviously wasn't an overnight hit, but by the end of its run and by Season 2, The Muppet Show had become an international phenomenon. So Jim figured, why not make a movie? The movie based off The Muppet Show would be simultaneously produced with The Muppet Show Season 3. Henson would not direct, that job would be given to James Farley. Given the increased narrative scale, the Muppets would have to leave the theater, and test shoots began to display how the Muppets would appear outside of their typical confines.
Think about the way to Hollywood. Hollywood, California? No, it's over near Los Angeles. Have you ever been to Los Angeles?
The Muppet movie is fucking peak cinema for all ages, accomplishing so much more than you'd expect for a movie based off a TV show. The direction of the movie was to create an origin story, which was sort of a tie-in with The Muppet Show given that it only utilizes the specific ensemble seen previously. The film succeeds as a comedy by perfectly using its established signature brand in a feature-length narrative, dodging a potential issue of it not feeling like an extended episode. It's just full of shit that keeps you off guard and takes a few extra seconds to process and laugh at.
No, the price on the sticker is the price you pay, and never more and never less.
We'll take that one for $11.95.
The characters consistently always sang and doing shit beyond expected. It's hilarious and retains the comedy of its predecessor. This isn't the Muppets at its most goofy either, so there's probably way more for adults to laugh at despite not really even having adult jokes. Maybe I would have hated this movie as a kid, I wouldn't know, I never saw it then. I'd barely seen any Muppets before middle school, but I was exposed to them due to the failure of Peppermint Park, which was becoming completely found media in 2017 and 18.
Hi gang, it's me, Ernie. Today on Peppermint Park, we're introducing the letter M. It's such a great letter. Just think of all the words that start with M.
Yeah, by the 80s, lots of unintentionally disturbing Muppet-inspired shows started getting made.
There are so many nice toys and books to choose from. Jesus, please give me wisdom and show me which toy you would like David to have. Oh, look, a little red bus.
The film has great meta-humor, which is refreshing to watch given that we live in a post-Rick and Morty world, where it's just been completely run to the ground and lost all charm.
Oh, fuck. We're in a YouTube video.
Having a road trip plot may seem like a disadvantage, but it's the first of many instances of Muppet plots using simplicity to its benefit, so the simplicity isn't an issue in the end. In fact, the various stops along the way aren't even ape shit. It's the humor and heart that truly elevates the narrative. Kermit's constant motivation to find success but refusal to sell out and the challenges that come with maintaining integrity are truly the heart of the movie. The conclusion is also emotional, not as a goodbye, but rather a joyful accomplishment. Not because the characters got there, but because it's a representation of the victory lap for Henson and Company. Featuring 250 characters they'd made in the past 20 or so years, hence to why almost everybody is here. It's an impressive technical feat to have 250 plus puppets on screen singing all at once, but it's also an emotional representation of the people that made the dream coming true. You can cry and feel happy for the characters and be sad that the movie's over. A combination of where it's happy, sad, and just really cool to look at. And if you couldn't tell, the entire movie is a comical oversimplification of the Muppets' history up until the point where they got their own movie. Henson does his thing, Henson meets Jane and Oz, then the rest of the gang, and then they hustle their way to the top. But you don't need to know any of the real-world parallels to still enjoy the movie. The simple plot is also benefited by its music. The musical numbers were written by Paul Williams, who had previously been a special guest on The Muppet Show and had written songs for Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, another Henson Company special which gained a cult following years later. The songs are great and retain the consistent theme of the psychological definition of a dream. Rainbow Connection, despite being a very simple opening number, is one of the many highlights of the film since it is such an emotional number. It does a great job of establishing Kermit's motivation, further narratively establishing a familiar layer of depth to the character, but here even more complex amongst a 90-minute adventure narrative. Rainbow Connection I'd consider one of the greatest songs ever written, and it's sung by a frog made of felt. The other numbers are great too, balancing the heart and the humor, much like the plot of the movie, with goofy numbers like Can You Picture That and somber numbers like I'm Going to Go Back There Someday, all relating to the optimism of making one's fantasies realities. You can tell it was made before the invention of CG, and the team was always trying to come up with crazy visuals to be done practically. The amount of full body shots of the characters is commendable and technically impressive, and the other aspects like the practical slapstick isn't obnoxious and looks great visually. The cinematography consistently utilizing the real world or recreations of it as much as possible. You get to see a journey across the US beautifully presented. The celebrity cameos are used sparingly and don't disrupt the plot. Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy are seen once again with a cameo given that he was important as an influence of Henson's and to the art of puppetry. Bergen passed away in 1978 before the release of the movie, making his appearance posthumous. The film was later dedicated to his quote, memory and magic. The late Orson Welles additionally makes a cameo. Orson Welles is one of the most influential directors and actors in film history. The man behind Citizen Kane, which many cite as the greatest movie ever made. I don't, but others do.
Oh, hi there. I'm going to audition for Lou Lord.
Yeah.
His cameo being named Lou Lord, which serves as an insert of Lou Grade, benefiting the comical oversimplification with his faith of the Muppet TV show. The fact that Orson Welles was even in the movie being yet another testament to how far the Muppets as an intellectual property had come. The only real issue I have as a result of the simplicity of the plot is the way Piggy is utilized. Most of the romance plots throughout the Muppets chronology are not well handled. Piggy doesn't do that much crucial to the plot, not really affecting the conclusion of getting the standard rich and famous contract, so it's kind of filler. There's also a Confederate flag in the background, in like a referencing American history way, not a hateful way, but there's a Confederate flag in the background, as well as the Johnny Cash episode of The Muppet Show. The Muppet movie was a huge hit, making $52 million on an $8 million budget, nearly quadruple its budget, and The Muppet Show continued for 3 more seasons. Fearing that the immense success of the show may make it evergreen and subsequently stale from sheer quantity, the 5th season would be final. But just because the show would wrap up, that didn't mean the beloved characters would disappear, and the success of the Muppet movie would create the priority of more movie adventures for Kermit and the gang. By 1981, the Muppets were on top of the world, and the success of the Muppet movie and 5 seasons of the show, but Jim Henson wanted to continue to push the boundaries of the medium, leading to the conception of a puppet fantasy film and a show that would stop war, the freshest on the mind being the fantasy. However, with the risk of character unfamiliarity, that may have created the issue of getting the project off the ground. But coming back to Lou Grade, he got the fantasy off the ground with the expense of the Muppet movie 2, simultaneously greenlighting risk and a higher chance of security. The Muppet movie 2 was seemingly in pre-production as early as the Muppet Show Season 5 was airing. The oldest surviving announcement being from Muppet Show Fan Club Magazine Volume 2, Number 6. Additionally advertising Season 5 in the same issue. A TV special titled The Muppets Go to the Movies was also created as a tie-in to the Muppet Movie 2. The special consisting of Muppet Show-esque sketches parodying famous movies, including The Wizard of Oz. It's kind of like El Camino, the Breaking Bad movie, given that it's like a bonus to the original series. Despite being an advertisement for the Muppet Movie 2, it's a fun special and a sort of extra episode to the original Muppet Show. It hasn't been officially re-released, but it's available on YouTube unofficially, and if you like the original show, check it out, even if it's only available in complete dog shit quality. But the final title of the Muppet Movie 2 was...
Wow!
The Great Muppet Caper.
Nice title.
Jim Henson's genius was the ability to see wonder far off in crazy directions and get people to follow him there. Roberta Moran, Dover Plains, New York.
The Great Muppet Caper would serve as a movie within a movie, a standard for some future Muppet narratives. Our protagonists play themselves as detectives. The concept also borrows elements from Sesame Street, where Kermit has the alternate identity of a news reporter. I'm also curious if the concept of making a detective story with puppets was inspired by the film Charlie McCarthy Detective. With this parody and hypothetical nature, there is a prominent tonal shift in comparison to the Muppet movie, which had an emotional edge to it. Great Caper taking the direction of a pure comedy. There is no heart in the movie whatsoever, but that is not an issue for me whatsoever. It is easily the funniest Muppet movie, just non-stop great jokes at the expense of eliminating an opportunity for any multi-dimensional characters, having a lot of smart, catch-you-off-guard humor that the characters have continued to succeed at.
You know, if you put enough sugar in this stuff, it tastes just like ginger ale.
If you like laughs in your Muppets more than anything else, you're probably gonna prefer this one. Again, the meta humor isn't Rick and Morty dog shit, and I love the inclusion of a fake outtake building on the concept of a movie within the movie.
Piggy, you're overacting. What? You're overacting. You're hamming it up.
I am not. I am trying to save this movie.
Oh, yeah? Well, save your performance instead.
The general narrative absurdity just overall benefits the plot. It's riddled with stupid conveniences, but it's so stupid that it loops back around to being genius. For example, Miss Piggy's fake address actually being the real address. It's one of the best examples of genre bending I've ever seen. It's a detective musical comedy, homaging Hollywood's early classy American musicals and detective stories. The cinematography and set design is similar to the previous, where it's super in-depth with environments being set in England. It's a gritty Victorian-looking movie, but it's dull in a well-detailed way that's great to look at. Happiness Hotel, which is extensively communicated to be a shithole, detailed excellently being a shithole. The technical quality in terms of absurdist shit for the characters to do is improved as well. I mean, like, you got Muppets on a hot air balloon, you got the whole squad on bikes with tricks, you got Muppets underwater. There's a whole lot more full body shots and interaction with crowds too. There's also way more practical slapstick, especially with the use of Muppets driving. The human characters' performances are ridiculously hammy and do a great job of benefiting the general absurdity. Speaking of ham, Miss Piggy is easily at her best here. Like I said, I don't think Miss Piggy has ever been the best handled in movie narratives, but here as a shit post where she's more integral to the story, she has way more to do. And being a pure comedy, the lack of genuine relationship drama isn't an issue because it's not really an objective. Having a distinguishable main trio of Kermit, Gonzo, and Fozzie with Piggy as the love interest, with the rest of the ensemble conveniently staying at the same hotel. So the gang's all here while simultaneously not having a disorganized movie. An issue it could have easily suffered from having 20 protagonists and whatnot. Again, with the general absurdity, the songs offer nothing deep, but are just really fun. They were written by Sesame Street's Joe Raposo, so there's some childlike whimsicality benefiting the tone because it's a dumb comedy. And Gonzo meets God, based. There's nothing deep about the movie, and that's its greatest strength. It does multiple things better than its predecessor, although I still do prefer its predecessor with its heart and humor balance. But it is easily the #1 funniest Muppet movie, even if it isn't necessarily the #1 best. It was not a huge hit in comparison to the previous Muppet movie, but it still did over double its budget, so it wasn't a huge loss. The pure comedy direction was a huge risk, and the word caper in the title was even criticized, since that's an old school word for far-fetched story, referencing its pure comedy direction, but doesn't really get the concept of a mystery comedy across immediately. But that could be attributed to its genre bending, which it does sparingly, so it's easier to actually watch than explain. As Caper was being produced, so was the fantasy film, the final title being The Dark Crystal, and the anti-war show Fraggle Rock, all go in release order. The Dark Crystal was co-directed by Frank Oz, his first directing credit, which would later affect the direction of the Muppets. But the consensus of it being groundbreaking stylistically is its greatest flaw. Despite it technically featuring Muppets, it was specifically designed to be as different as possible to its predecessors, the style not being paired with narrative substance. The puppets more resembled the Land of Gorge grotesque but impressive designs, but don't expect a narration from Kermit like in Emmett Otter's Jugman Christmas.
Hi all, this is Kermit the Frog, and I'm here to tell you the story about Emmett Otter's...
I did actually have this on VHS growing up. Disclaimer, I used VHS until like 2014, I'm not that old. My first true exposure to the Henson Company beyond 90s and 2000 Sesame Street, rest in peace to the alphabet. But like everybody's watched Sesame Street, it's integral to the American childhood to anybody born past 69. And I did not like this movie as a kid, and I loved The Phantom Menace growing up, so the storytelling bar was really low. Unable to appreciate its technical qualities as a child, I was bored out of my mind, and I loved weird practical puppet shit like the original Star Wars trilogy growing up. The Jabba's Palace stuff was some of my favorite stuff in the franchise at the time. And I still love that entire hour-plus sequence, even if it makes no sense as a rescue mission, and it should have been 10 minutes from a narrative perspective. And of course, Return of the Jedi, also unknowingly featuring Frank Oz. As an adult, I don't love it, but I still appreciate it. So if Crystal was handled better, it could have been the next Star Wars, since the original trilogy was gonna wrap up next year in '83. The actual plot is that our protagonist Jen is the last of the species of the Mystics and is attempting to find a shard of crystal that will maintain peace. The actual crystal being held by the villainous Skeksis. So it's up to Jen to repair the dark crystal, I think. It's like the Problem Solvers, but with good puppets and without the seizures, but still hard to contemplate. It's very noisy in a grotesque way that's not obnoxious, but simultaneously not the most investing. Lots of kids were scared by it. I've heard stories of people being frightened of it as children. I mean, like, a grotesque creature's face literally disintegrates surrounded by its family 11 minutes in. And I wasn't terrified as a child, but I was bored. The film being overly reliant on its actual mythology, for example, the Skeksis doing their ritual practices for such a ridiculous amount of time, limiting the action and adventure. It looks amazing, but it lacks emotional weight. Feels like a series of creature doing weird shit and less like a movie. The mythology just being overused and underdeveloped in general. It's oddly quiet, with mostly noise being nature ambience and weird creature noises. The villains feel like the protagonist here, just given the amount of focus they have, but without much actually happening. The reoccurring theme of endangered species as a result of war creates a very unsatisfactory ending. Like, yeah, the day is saved, but there's barely any lives to live peacefully anymore. It's an intended all-ages movie that you can really only like as an adult. It's too bizarre for kids to contemplate, despite not being mature, and there's not the most for adults to appreciate beyond the groundbreaking production value, but it's still so groundbreaking that it's only worth watching for adults, but it's not a great movie either. It's like a really shitty brew. Like, yeah, kids can't drink alcohol, it's only for adults. You'll probably drink it because it's free. But is it the good kind? Not really. For every amazing thing about it, there's about 10 dull elements. The Dark Crystal kind of sucks ass, but its redeeming qualities would make it beloved later. But at the box office, it did okay, making $41 million on a $25 million budget. But on the bright side, Fraggle Rock premiered to success, and like I said, the conception was based on a motive to stop war. The show was released near the end of the Cold War, a time of geopolitical tension between the United States and the USSR, a hostility that could have led to military action between two superpowers and worth consequences. The concept lifting elements of the species of the Freckles Gonzo was based on.
Hey, give me a cigar over there.
Here it is, boss.
Thank you. You do good work, fella.
Ah, you criminal.
The conflicts often being a result of species interference between the four species. The Fraggles, the Doozers, the Gorgs, and the humans referred to by the others as the silly creatures, serving as stand-ins for different countries. The main Fraggles themselves are all exceptionally multidimensional, all having different flaws and personalities, which allows their motives to conflict, but without them turning against each other to provide the moral of cooperation. I swore I first saw Fraggle Rock at Chuck E. Cheese, except there's no proof that Fraggle Rock was ever included on the TVs at Chuck E. Cheese. However, VeggieTales segments were, so I'm probably misremembering that.
Here is Larry the Cucumber.
Given the Muppet Show's ending, it was understood that more creative risks had to be funded through the guaranteed profits of familiar characters. So a third Muppet Show spin-off movie was already being planned. Given Hence's involvement in so much elsewhere, it was decided that Frank Oz would direct the third Muppet feature. Muppets Take Manhattan is considered the black sheep of the franchise because it's safe to say that it's different. And you're either gonna love it or hate it, gaining a rather divisive reputation in following years. Jerry Jewell, the signature Muppet writer, was also not involved. Both thematically and stylistically, the tonal shift is incredibly noticeable. The plot features the Muppets attempting to get a Broadway musical off the ground. Sound familiar? Well, the plot was seemingly based off the failed attempt at the actual Muppet Broadway musical prior to the show, holding a similar format of comically oversimplifying the story of the character's history similar to the Muppet movie. Of course, this one being a lot less accurate to the previous in terms of real-world parallels. A return to form with more drama than ever, kind of like Cars 3, but not dog. Additionally, contemplating risks from the main conflict of Manhattan melodies going nowhere, making sacrifices for food and stops throughout the journey, being even less wacky than the Muppet movie, the conflicts featuring less jokes throughout, even non-comical arguments, because that's ruthless entertainment.
Hey, Kermit, do you think we should change the script?
Yeah, Kermit, what should we do?
I don't know. How should I know? Why are you always asking me anyway? Can't you take care of yourselves? I don't know what to do next. We failed, okay? We tried and we failed.
Kermit even getting hit by a car not for laughs and suffering as a result of unintentionally pursuing a lifestyle he's specifically attempting to avoid being stuck in. The film additionally showing the Muppets forced to comply to careers not suiting their interests, adding an entire sense of artistic realism, and that's who the movie is truly for, artists. Much of the film's marketing was built around the conflict of Piggy's desire for marriage being prevented from fiscal unstability.
What you can tell us if you and Kermit get married in the film?
Well, Kermit, Johnny, I know this might hurt you, but there's something does momentous happen in the film. There is kind of a little wedding kind of thing. I can't talk about it, though.
The actual conclusion of this Muppet timeline having Kermit and Piggy married. Each Muppet project just exists in its own timeline, which isn't really supposed to be questioned, whether a movie is a movie within a movie or an in-universe conflict. The actual wedding is brilliantly executed, taking a more episodic nature of showing the musical numbers of somebody's getting married, showcasing the phases and emotions of a wedding ceremony. The film also introduces a standard that would be more prominent in addition to having a human protagonist, taking the familiar aspect of the human special guest. Rizzo the Rat is also given more prominent role here, and he'd be even more prominent in future projects. The film also introduces Muppet babies here, which are used as a hypothetical scenario to display Piggy's appreciation for Kermit's presence, but was unknowingly a start of another huge Muppet show. Muppet Babies was seen as viable before Manhattan even released, so a new Henson Company merchandise juggernaut got a Saturday morning cartoon series. Muppet performers would not perform their characters at risk of scheduling conflicts since it was the first animated Muppet show. Henson would not be heavily involved, but he had strict quality control. This was '84, the era of mainstream bug juice. The series being designed to have reoccurring core values as a children's program and to make sure the Muppet cast was used sparingly, especially in comparison to the substance of Sesame Street and Fraggle Rock, trying to make a larger impact with the next Muppet cash cow on the rise, featuring the ensemble of Muppet babies found in Manhattan with the additions of Baby Bunsen and Beaker. In an attempt for further series diversity, Skeeter, Scooter's sister, was introduced specifically for this cast, the parental figure to the babies being the nursery's nannies whose face is never shown. Statler and Waldorf were added toward the end of the run and were not de-aged. Baby Bean Bunny would also be introduced, Bean Bunny being introduced in a special in 1986 titled The Tale of Bunny Picnic. The series would focus on the Muppet Babies' conflicts in the nursery, with creativity and cooperation often being the resolution, taking elements from the Muppet Show of performing various acts, this time through their imagination to overcome their struggles rather than performing a show, often incorporating their imaginations collaboratively. In these imagination segments, pre-existing movie footage was often incorporated, which was viewed as impressive at the time given that the visual samples were cleared, also including parodies of recognizable movies like The Wizard of Oz. Muppet Babies aired for 8 seasons, longer than the original Muppet Show, but containing less episodes, which opened the market for more Muppets in animation, with a Fraggle Rock animated series which was cancelled after 1 season with its greatest flaw, inferiority. There was also a cancelled series called Little Muppet Monsters, which featured a variety show of puppet segments of familiar characters, puppet segments of the Little Muppet Monsters, and animated Muppet segments, and was cancelled as a result of quality control. Manhattan made even less than Caper, but was still viable. But what it spawned allowed far more creative risk as a result of all the profit from those Baby Fozzie plushies. The Muppet Show had a successful theatrical trilogy, so why not Sesame Street, which by Manhattan's release was on season 16, leading to the film Sesame Street Presents Follow That Bird, which would be Sesame Street's first attempt at a theatrical release. The plot is way more absurd than you'd expect for a Sesame Street movie, attempting to increase the scale, given that it's similar to the Muppet movie, of adapting a variety show, featuring a bird government getting Big Bird to revoke his residency from Sesame Street, but then regretting his decision and running away from his adopted family. So it's a race for his friends back at Sesame Street to find him. And as it was a Sesame Street adaptation, the element of animated segments were even included, here relating to the narrative. It's never in your face, which is calm and reasonable, as well as not being too complex, as it is still a preschool movie. There's nothing deep about it, which is appropriate for its target audience. You get to see tons of familiar Sesame Street locations at a larger and more detailed scale than ever, which is a fun production upgrade.
One John gets Goonie! Hi, Mom.
The film was a moderate loss, which could mainly be attributed to the limited audience of preschool movies. But going back to new creative ventures that Henson wanted to prioritize, there was a desire to make another fantasy given that The Dark Crystal wasn't greatly received, leading to the conception of Labyrinth. Bringing up Star Wars again, George Lucas of Star Wars would help produce. Henson taking another great risk with another fantasy. This time tried to retain more elements of successful Muppet projects, with elements of The Dark Crystal, although it has now been argued by many, including that myself, that the lack of story was Crystal's greatest flaw. Humans and musical numbers would be incorporated similar to the traditional Muppet formula. One of the main concepts Henson wanted in the film was a rock star main antagonist, Jareth the King of the Goblins, played by David Bowie, who gives a perfectly hammy performance. He just plays himself in a fantasy film, practically. Bowie would also contribute music to the film, although being limited in its overall musical direction, only having 5 musical numbers throughout. Magic Dance is the highlight. It's such a stupid dance number, but the rhyme scheme is ridiculous and charmful. The film actually focusing on the teenage sibling Sarah wishing that her infant brother was taken away by goblins. And then the figure of speech actually happens. Being forced to travel through a labyrinth in an attempt to reach the goblins to get her brother back, running into various absurd creatures throughout. Overall taking less risks than Crystal, but still being an improvement over Crystal, I'd argue. It's definitely more charmful with its increased whimsicality, as it is a fantasy film at the end of the day. And even if the plot isn't the most consistent, and it doesn't really benefit to its simplicity, similar to Crystal, it's the tech behind it, plus David Bowie, which alone makes it worth a watch. Technically, the physical environments and the goblin army scenes stand out on the basis of quantity of disgusting, twitching creatures all at screen at once. The actual practical complication design in the labyrinth is astounding. You can visually sympathize with the protagonist given its sheer complication and similarities. Fiscally and creatively, a huge risk that was considered worse than The Dark Crystal and performed horribly financially. But meanwhile, back on television, other specials were created with familiar casts, like The Muppets, a celebration of 30 years, a clip show specials showcasing the history of the Muppets up until that point, with original award show sketch segments including reappearances from some of the earliest Muppets.
Hey, I just have one question, man. How come you look so much better now than you did then?
Well, that's one of the advantages of being a Muppet. By the way, where is Yorick? Oh, Yorick, yes. Anyway, let's remember all the help that I've had through the years. Yorick, will you stop?
Also celebrating the history, A Muppet Family Christmas being one of the most memorable TV specials because it is the definitive crossover between Muppets, Sesame Street, and Fraggle Rock, all gathering at Fozzie's mother's house, featuring extensive interactions between the different casts. Sure, they'd cameo in each other's stuff all the time, but prior there was never anything you could call an actual crossover special. It's a crossover that's not very ambitious, and that's why it works. There was clear thought into who should interact with who, mainly characters who wouldn't typically interact, like the Swedish chef attempting to cook Big Bird. Despite being the definitive crossover between beloved characters, the special is sort of obscure since it's entered copyright hell, so it's only available through its VHS release and rips of it, which are widely unofficially available, but it's free on YouTube and is a simple but overlooked part of its history. By 1989, the characters were far past icon status, but Henson wanted the cash cow to seemingly live on forever. Seemingly, with the fear of mismanagement of his characters after his life, Henson would desire the Muppets to be elsewhere. And who better to sell the Muppets to than Disney? And who had been the CEO of Disney since 1984? Michael Eisner, the same Michael Eisner that allowed the Muppet Valentine show to get off the ground. In 1989, Disney is now what is considered their dark age. The actual length of the dark age is debatable among nerds and historians. Some say from 1981 to 1988 because of the lack of viability from projects released around the time, but others say from Walt Disney's death in 1967 up until their mainstream resurgence in 1989 later that year. 1989 to 1999 being referred to as the Disney Renaissance. Disney eras are debatable in general since there's so much that could be factored in from a fiscal and opinionated quality standpoint, but in 89, Disney was about to enter what would be considered their Disney Renaissance. Guys, why does it look like Vegas? The shift in terms of audience reception could be attributed to the quality control, attempting to recapture the very viable magic of Walt Disney. Obviously, in the quote dark age, Disney was in a slump, but they didn't necessarily go anywhere. Disney was capable of keeping their signature characters popular, not listening to what any box office underperformances were telling them. Something Henson could clearly sympathize with, always relying on the cash cow to keep the company going amongst its other failures. Henson and Eisner agreeing that the Muppets in their ensemble would be a great addition to reforming the quality control within the company. So with a popular franchise to brighten the mood, the Muppets were going to Disney World.
Guess who picked it out?
Oh, it's a Goofy hat.
Goofy picked it out?
Yeah, terrific.
Naturally.
Well, thank you.
Before that, though, on February 5th, 1989, Sesame Street songwriter Joe Raposo would pass away.
Sing a song.
But by 1990, the Muppets would be present at Disney World. On May 6th, the TV special meant to commemorate and advertise future park collaborations was created, titled The Muppets Go to Walt Disney World, featuring the Muppets trespassing into Disney World and exploring many of the park attractions available at the time, ending with the conclusion of the Muppets meeting Mickey Mouse animated himself.
Come on in! Gosh, it sure is swell to see all the Muppets here at Walt Disney World. Welcome, everyone!
Oh, thanks, Mickey.
2 days prior to the premiere of the special, there was a promotional interview held on the Arsenio Hall show, additionally featuring Muppet performer Kevin Clash, most known for playing Elmo, but here playing Clifford, a Muppet introduced in the Jim Henson Hour, a short-lived experimental variety show.
Yes, Clifford. Clifford is our newest member of the band, and he's absolutely great. Mm-hmm. And I was told he'd come out right after a commercial. If you take a commercial.
Okay, we'll take a commercial. We'll come right back, and we'll talk to Clifford. We'll be back.
This shitty, unnecessarily long miniseries is brought to you by Ko-Fi, a service that allows the Dr. X Henry Show to be supported directly because YouTube hates art and poor people. They will take any opportunity to snatch dollars from people who give their site traction. This helps me not be homeless and make more episodes. For a small monthly fee, you can get early previews and behind-the-scenes stuff and new shitty videos, as well as just tip the show directly. A tremendous deal for sociopaths who watch this garbage, link in the description below.
It's very painful. She has a right that'll lay you right out.
That's just an old piece of mosquito caught in your throat there.
Yes. I would have said I had a frog in my throat, but I won't say that.
No. Wait. Okay. Anyhow, how about if I go to another subject and not make you uncomfortable with
Good.
this?
I'd appreciate not talking about things personal like those things anyhow.
Okay.
Henson is noticeably sick in the interview. Henson is 53 in this interview and had a cold. This cold is arguably a result of his constant international traveling, a cold that escalated into death.
Sing a song.
Puppeteer Jim Henson today was unexpected. Henson died from complications of pneumonia, which a New York hospital spokesperson says was untreated for 3 days by Henson. He leaves behind a community of children taught and entertained by his Muppets.
Henson would pass away on May 16, 1990, the same day as Sammy Davis Jr., as well as the air date of a special titled Sing, Sesame Street Remembers Joe Raposo and His Music, which Henson appears on camera in.
Joe, I remember his warmth. I think of Joe as a big warm teddy bear, seeing him for the first time in several months, and always the big hug and the big smile and the friendliness and the open heart.
Henson's death is acknowledged within a disclaimer at the beginning of the special since it was going to air on May 16th anyway. Henson had prepared for his inevitable passing by assuring his properties were in the hands of people carrying his spirit and vision. On July 2nd, 1990, Jim Henson's memorial would be held, but it wasn't your average memorial.
Children aren't usually taken to a funeral for fun, but a memorial service for puppet master Jim Henson today was a celebration of life for children of all ages.
One of Jim's favorite times in any production was the musical pre-record session.
intertwined throughout with many memorial speeches from his team featuring performances of various songs from the Muppet catalog in their characters' voices.
Folks adore so, and adore so, even more so. Lydia, oh Lydia, that inside.
As well as Muppet Show special guest Harry Belafonte performing, including all the associated performers at the time joining together for a rendition of Just One Person.
Making it 3.
People you can say, believe in me.
Steve Whitmire, who performs Wembley Fraggle, is dressed in all green. Further continuing Memoriam, another TV special titled The Muppets Celebrate Jim Henson aired, which includes a collection of notable moments, some of which are the same from Celebration of 30 Years. In addition to Steven Spielberg commenting on Henson's contribution to film, Sesame Street special guest Ray Charles discussing the music of the Muppets, special guest Harry Belafonte reciting his speech from the Henson Memorial, given Belafonte's humanitarian background discussing many of the humanitarian values throughout Henson's work.
Those desperate places where parents watch their children grow, knowing they'll never be educated, who'll never have a chance at life as it should be. These same parents watch as Jim's creations for the first time not only put smiles on the faces of their children, but develop in them the appetite to learn, watching Sesame Street, and the ability to love because they see the love and the caring that exudes from the Muppets and the Henson family of creatures.
The special also featuring a reoccurring sketch of the Muppets failing to put on a show for their assigned Jim Henson tribute number, unknowing of that tribute being in memoriam.
Dear Kermit, my cousin Diane has a pet frog and she named him Kermit. And he could say hi just like you.
Isn't that sweet?
Yeah, I feel very sorry that your best friend Jim died. What? Died? Jim
Died? But we were just starting to get to know him.
Perhaps the substance of Jim Henson's genius was the ability to see wonder far off in crazy directions and get people to follow him there. Roberta Moran, Dover Plains, New York.
Dear Kermit, I hope you feel better. I will miss Jim Henson too. I hope this letter makes you feel better. I love you. Bridget Kerwin, Peabody, Massachusetts.
You know, Mr. Henson was a very good, talented teacher. He will never be dead in my heart. Elizabeth Nicola Edelman, Mountain Lakes, New Jersey. While falling asleep that night, our 5-year-old daughter Blair said, "It's a good thing there are people who can do Jim Henson's job. He'll be with us every time we watch the Muppets. He'll be able to see them from heaven." The Reeser family, Las Vegas, Nevada. We will miss you, Jim Henson. Matt.
Cancel.
What?
Cancel. Cancel the production number. Cancel everything.
No decision has yet been made about whether a puppeteer will ever be hired to replace Henson.
Kermit is noticeably missing, but shows up at the end of the performance of Just One Person.
What a good song. I knew you guys could do the tribute for Jim.
Kermit is played by Steve Whitmire. The man once nicknamed Kermit had become Kermit, unknowingly the apprentice of Jim.
That just about brings us down to the end of another one, but before we go, let me thank you for being with us for our tribute to Jim Henson. And we'll be seeing you soon with more Muppet stuff, because that's the way the boss would want it.
However, the Disney deal was not finished, and overship complications only increased as a result of Henson's death.
We say, when you wish upon a star, your dreams come true.
Well, actually, what we say is, someday you'll find it, the Rainbow Connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me.
Uh-oh, they're starting to argue philosophy.
However, the Muppet Vision 3D Disney attraction was successfully created and is arguably Jim Henson's swan song. So to continue what was started, it was time to get the team back together. But that wasn't helped through another crucial loss, Richard Hunt passing away on January 7th, 1992, as it was the age of the AIDS epidemic. So what could be done to do the characters justice? Why not another movie?
Gotten letters from kids that say, you know, please keep Ernie. Bert will be unhappy.
Jim Henson's Muppets will always remind us of this wonderful, talented man.
7-year-old Emily Winnie says her favorite character, Big Bird, must continue without Henson.
He's probably thinking about Jim a lot. My favorite Muppet is Kermit, and I think he's sad, and I think all the Muppets are sad. I still think it'll never be the same without Jim Henson. The puppets could still go on. They could live forever.
Without Henson, this seemed like a logical step, since a fourth Muppet movie was always intended. One of the intended concepts had a script written and was titled The Cheapest Muppet Movie Ever Made. The intention to be a movie within a movie directed by Gonzo, titled Into the Jaws of the Demons of Death. Gonzo would spend half the budget on the opening credits, meaning that the movie budget would decrease progressively only to get a proper budget back as a result of sponsorships, allowing its conclusion to once again be over budget. The actual plot of Gonzo's in-universe movie being unknown, I personally assume the film would have segments dedicated to Gonzo's direction and the in-universe movie. This scrap project could be considered more experimental, so I'm curious to see if it would truly resonate with audiences upon release date. The thing about the Muppets from a structural creative perspective is that there was always a team being guided by Henson. So who would be the creative that would replace Henson to resume the same processes? Well, Henson, Brian Henson, Jim's third child. Brian Henson had been involved in minor parts, and hopefully he'd be alive longer, so nepotism, hell yeah. But this is a rare instance of nepotism I don't hate. Brian Henson's talent agent pitched the idea to Brian to tell the story of A Christmas Carol using Muppets, on the basis that A Christmas Carol was an acclaimed piece of literature. And what may seem like a off-the-cuff idea was shockingly well received. In my opinion, it's a more genius concept than you'd ever expect. Having the adaptation of A Christmas Carol being a movie within a movie. Being one of the most famous pieces of literature, I don't gotta tell you the plot. Casting the Muppets as different characters from the novel. The casting is perfect for both the Muppet stand-ins and when the film uses standard portrayals of the characters. It's actually stupid how well cast the Muppets are. The use of pre-existing characters enhancing the source material way more than you'd expect. Another large benefit to its concepts to retain the human Muppet dynamic, with Ebenezer Scrooge being the equivalent of the celebrity special guest, being portrayed by big-name actor Sir Michael Caine for an enhanced sense of audience familiarity. Caine decided to take his role ridiculously seriously, which is a benefit to show the moral irregularities in comparison to the people around him. The Muppets are shockingly the functioning members of society here, in addition to the ghosts of the story being Muppetized spins rather than filled roles. Also creating original children for Kermit and Piggy, an actual oddity to see but benefits the hypothetical in the end. The usage of Gonzo as Charles Dickens tagging along with Rizzo the Rat as himself being one of the most sparing creative decisions. Often reciting the original text directly, which the film does, and it's obvious because he starts speaking 1800s Brit talk, but it does an excellent job of reincorporating dialogue throughout. Also altering Jacob Marley to be the Marley brothers, being portrayed by Statler and Waldorf, the characters from the original ensemble most aligned with Scrooge. The film does start out in memoriam to both Jim Henson and Richard Hunt. This is further reflective throughout the absence of Rolf and Scooter, Rolf being limited to a silent character, being that he was the Muppet most close to Henson, while not being a character too integral to exclude narratively, unlike Kermit.
When I came into the thing, I was 18, and I was really energetic, and, I'd say, yeah, sure, everything you want to do, boss, no problem. I talked a lot like him, because he's my voice when I was younger, like this.
Hi, are you Kermit the Frog?
Yeah.
I'm Scooter.
Cute name.
I'm your new gopher.
Gopher? No. We have frogs and pigs and chickens around here, but we've never had a gopher. Matter of fact, you don't even look like a gopher.
Yeah, well, you don't understand. You see, I'm your new gopher.
Yeah, I'll go for coffee, I'll go for sandwiches, I'll go for anything you need.
Given that Scooter was kind of a self-insert of Richard Hunt, the character was temporarily retired. Despite being a Muppet retelling, that might just come off as a shitpost, but the Muppet actors don't eliminate any of the themes of the source material. As for Kermit, this is Steve Whitmire's first proper Kermit performance, and in his brief appearance in the Celebrate Jim Henson special, it's a little rough.
Let me thank you for being with us for our tribute to Jim Henson. And we'll be seeing you soon with more Muppet stuff, because that's the way the boss would want it.
But by Carol's production, he'd perfected his spin on the character.
How was he at church?
Oh, as good as gold and better. He told me that he hoped the people saw him in church because it might be pleasant for them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
Given that Kermit's voice was similar to Jim's outright speaking voice, it is very hard to replicate since that involves zero vocal manipulation tactics. So getting it perfect would be next to impossible, but Whitmire still does an excellent job with handling the franchise's mascot. Like I said, the themes are retained, so there's still a horror edge to everything, seeing well-executed supernatural Muppet imagery, while retaining the drama that makes Scrooge's change in character effective to the audience.
I am sure we shall never forget Tiny Tim, or this first parting that there was among us.
Still killing off Tiny Tim, even in a kid's movie. A Christmas Carol being a public domain story with so much acclaim, there's been tons of other PG adaptations that don't temporarily kill off Tiny Tim, a crucial plot point amongst Scrooge's change in character. From what I've seen, lots of parody adaptations and child-friendly version, the child lives throughout. But if the Muppets can do it, so can you. Don't be a pussy, kill the child, even if it's an elementary school play. Paul Williams of the Muppet movie and Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas came back to write the songs, and I think it's their greatest soundtrack. The seasonal replay value helps, but the orchestral approach to everything just knocks you into the stratosphere with some holiday cheer for bonus, while retaining the drama, comedy, holiday, heart, and horror aspect of the source material, enhancing the emotional weight of each plot point with the grim and cheerful nature of the holiday season. Atmospheric is a great way to describe countless elements of the film. The set design captures 1840s England aesthetic perfectly, while kind of visually retaining the light social commentary aspects of the original story, displaying the consequences of wealth inequality as it attempts to be reformed over the gift of giving. With the cinematography being both classy for the high class and greatly gritty for the low class, like previous Muppet projects, especially Caper, also set in England. This was the 90s, so this was the beginning of the modern day special effects we use now, and there's actually lots of green screen, but it's used incredibly strategically, most of the skies and backdrops being fake. Marley and Marley is a particularly impressive number from two characters who rarely sing. Michael Caine, despite being the protagonist of the movie, doesn't sing very much over the course of the movie, and that's a great way to evolve the sense of changing as a person. He could have easily had a number about how he hates everything, but singing would make him a more functioning member amongst his Muppet society. He doesn't even sing his own introductory. It's the Muppet citizens around him criticizing him, denying any chance of his moral character changing, foreshadowing the unexpected change in Scrooge's moral differences. He only has one solo song despite his screen time, Thankful Heart, a redemption song. The song When Love Is Gone, when Scrooge loses his hoochie and future Scrooge views his memory again, being the thing that finally breaks him, and we hear him sing for the first time when the movie is almost over. Caine's brief musical performances are great. The pain and shift in his identity is very noticeable through his vocal tones, both elevating the narrative. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, it's because this musical number was cut out of the theatrical version. And why? Disney. Disney did not make the film, but they did distribute it, meaning that the film is a collaboration between the Henson Company and Disney, attempting to fulfill Henson's vision of Disney ownership.
That's the way the boss would want it.
But that legally couldn't be fulfilled because that didn't stop collaboration. Disney wanted the specific scene removed because the scene did poorly in test screenings, which is kind of an asinine take to say that kids wouldn't like that part of the film when it released in 1992, the same time as the Disney Renaissance. Hell, it was in theaters the same time as Aladdin. It's a very Disney princessy ballad, which were decades before The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, which were recent additions to the catalog in 1992. Yes, there's no Muppets because Gonzo and Rizzo are used reasonably throughout the film, never interrupting proper character development with their narration shenanigans. But Disney seriously thought kids were that stupid. It's like 3 minutes without Muppets. I get they don't have long attention spans, but 3 minutes.
Uh-oh, they're starting to argue philosophy.
A foreshadowing of the horror to come. But it's a great number and important to the narrative of Scrooge's character building, given the reprise to conclude the movie. Seeing Scrooge only sing as a backing vocalist for the first time in the last 30 seconds or so is much more effective of a redemption than Grateful Heart, which, When Love Is Gone, sets up. Brian Henson and company disagreed with Disney's policy, but complied to their order because it could risk losing the distributor that the boss would have wanted. However, this instance of corporate meddling in Muppets only applies to the theatrical version. The VHS home media releases included this scene. Later home media releases, like most DVDs, contain the theatrical edit. So if you grew up with the movie on DVD, there's a good chance that there's an entire musical number you may have never seen. The master film reels did go missing, so by the time of crispier DVD remasters, it wasn't included in that. But thankfully, the original master copies of the film were recovered and remastered the VHS version, and that became widely available to stream on Disney+. The VHS remaster being an extra on the selection screen on Disney+. You can also view the scene individually in its remaster. It should be the other way around if you ask me. Why would you knowingly watch the DVD version if it doesn't have all the content? Throw the DVD/theatrical version in the garbage, watch the VHS remaster version. When Love Is Gone isn't the only deleted song from the movie either. There were 2 numbers that never even had sequences shot and were simply soundtrack exclusives. First, Room in Your Heart, sung by Dr. Bunsen Honeydew and Beaker, encouraging Scrooge to donate to charity for the benefit of love. Second, Chairman of the Board, sung by Sam Eagle, expanding the plot point of Scrooge viewing his youth receiving his education through song. They're cute numbers, but I don't have a problem with them being excluded since there's already plot points dedicated to these aspects of Scrooge's character, so their exclusion isn't hugely consequential to Scrooge's character progression. The Muppets Christmas Carol is genuinely the best version of A Christmas Carol. The pre-existing Muppets somehow only enhancing the already great source material. You wouldn't expect a random combination to be the best adaptation, but it's so well crafted and wastes zero potential that I'd go as far to say that it's the best Muppet movie. But remember how I said it was in theaters around the same time as Aladdin? Well, it doesn't end there. Home Alone 2: Lost in Trump Tower was also in theaters. So for family movies that December, there was some tough competition. The film did fine at the box office, making $27.2 million on a $12 million budget. That's more than double, but not much more. However, the film would gain cult status in future years, seemingly benefited by quality and seasonal replay value. So the movie performed fine and wasn't hated by critics, so Brian Henson continued the direction of utilizing Muppets to retell classic literature. There was one direct-to-video movie titled Muppets Classic Theater, retelling various fairy tales.
Elvis! That is not Elvis! Those are just oddly dressed elves come to help the shoemaker.
I get it, it's Elvis, instead of elves. I'm all up. Oh, mama. The special is very dull and inferior to the gem that was The Muppets Go to the Movies. Next, adapting Robert Louis Stevenson's novel Treasure Island. I mean, like, the book has a shitty fast food chain named after it. That means the source material has to be good, right? Once again, it was a Disney collab, technically, with Disney distributing the film. It does also creatively retain additional similarities from Christmas Carol, as well as The Great Muppet Caper, taking a pure comedy direction for the sequel. The film being an action-adventure story, taking a different approach with less dialogue-oriented comedy, and more of an action slapstick approach rather than the shit-falling-apart slapstick approach. It's the first time we get to see flat-out choreographed action sequences combining humans and puppets. The emphasis on action being a unique quality in comparison. The cinematography additionally containing the familiar good but gritty cinematography. The puppet-human action direction is way more energetic with its absurdity than Labyrinth or Crystal, benefiting its comedic direction. It's more of what you'd conceptually expect from Christmas Carol. Unlike Carol, this is a flat-out parody, and I love it. Taking notes from the previous, realizing the comedic potential between Gonzo and Rizzo, here not narrating, but both playing themselves, tagging along as friends to the protagonists of the novel, Jim Hawkins. Having a main trio not including Kermit, but reducing his role sparingly. Sam Eagle also having a more prominent role and having a great disciplinary dynamic with Kermit and the rest of the Muppet Buccaneers. In addition to Long John Silver remaining human, played by Tim Curry. Curry is just one of those actors who is perfectly hammy and always steals the show. He's about as close as you can get to an IRL Muppet, being a complete opposite to the direction Michael Caine took with his Scrooge performance.
Here you go. Your bread and water for today.
But I ordered shrimp scampi.
It's more than you deserve, you villainous dogs!
The action movie direction not sacrificing the musical numbers, which are consistently over the top and benefit the entire sea shanty aesthetic. The songs are just badass and fucking fun. Legit one of the best pirate soundtracks I've heard, and it's from felt animal puppets. It's hilarious to see felt puppets singing about murder. The opening number, Shiver My Timbers, being ridiculously kick-ass and something you'd never expect to hear in a Muppet movie. The aesthetic helped even more by the score written by Hans Zimmer. Always a great choice for an action movie. His much more famous pirate score, Pirates of the Caribbean series, not coming out until 2003. So this movie might have got him that job. Jim's singing voice isn't that great, it's not a huge issue. He's not even that prominent vocally, the mic is passed around a lot. You know, it's a child actor, it's rarely gonna be perfect. But besides that, the songs are really fun and dig the vibe and tone of the film perfectly. Rolf, once again, silent cameo.
Don't forget to come back tomorrow for our lunchtime special.
It's just fun. It's more of a kids movie that anyone can enjoy. There's less exclusivity for adults to appreciate. There is still some of that adults-only humor despite not really being adult jokes. The politician and lawyer jokes during Tim Curry's musical number Professional Pirate. But it's just fun. Not constantly brilliant with its dialogue or anything, but it wastes zero time. It's just super fast-paced, not trying to do anything deep. It's just fun. You could do the movie justice in one word. The film made $42.7 million on a $5 million budget, which is less than half the budget of the money spent on Christmas Carol. So it was a hit because it was surprisingly cheaper to make. So the Muppets had still been proven to scrap enough cash and critical acclaim when attempting to do what the boss would have wanted. So if they could make successful movies, why not make another Muppet show?
Oh, baby, I love you. You know that.
Congratulations, Clifford. You got your own show.
Hold on, baby. My own show? I've always wanted to have my own show. Man, this is great. So when does it start?
Oh, in about 30 seconds.
I'll call you back.
Leading to not a revival of the original show to respect the boss's vision of it only having 5 seasons, but another variety show serving as a spiritual successor. Leading to Muppets Tonight, which is easily the second best Muppet show, not that there's much competition. The show first airing on ABC, which is owned by Disney, and second on Disney Channel, so once again, a boss-wished Disney collab. The thing about the show is that as it is a new show, it focuses more on passing the mic rather than getting the band back together, having the cast being split between old and new. Frank Oz's characters would have a less prominent role since he was busy developing his directing career. The show does partially rely on the ensemble he was prominent in for multiple characters, but the show doesn't do a poor job of balancing old with new. Kermit is not the host, which was a decision that seemingly did not resonate with audiences. And keep in mind, getting the right host Muppet was one of the issues that prevented Sex and Violence and the Valentine's Show from really going anywhere without further reworking. Kermit is still in the show and prominent, but people found the change off-putting as a revival.
It's Muppets Tonight with our very special guest star, Garth Brooks. Yeah!
If you're a human being, take a break from the race.
I'm sitting with Clifford now, who is one of the newest members. Clifford, how did you hook up with these guys?
Clifford was kind of a character the boss had hoped for, being one of his last original characters, and was puppeteered by Kevin Clash, who was also playing Elmo.
Hey ho, Kermit the Frog here today to talk to you about 2 very important feelings. And those 2 important feelings are happy and sad.
Hi, Green Frog.
Hi there, Elmo.
Although originally a Sesame Street background Muppet, occasionally having Jerry Nelson's signature caveman-y gravel voice.
Very far. We are very near to you. Far is where we are. Near.
Elmo wouldn't actually become an established character until 1984.
Ah, so you want to play my game too, huh,
Yes,
Elmo?
Yes. Play.
Okay, well, why not?
And by 1996, he was easily the most popular character. Being the most realistically childlike, even more than Big Bird, he resonated with parents and children. And in the 90s, he was becoming a hugely popular character, really overthrowing Big Bird as the franchise mascot, if you ask me. In 96, infamously Tickle Me Elmo being the hottest toy of that holiday season, leading to grannies getting trampled at Walmart and whatnot. But Clifford never really caught on with audiences, and him being in this position of unfamiliar host really killed the chances of him being a beloved cast member, given the creative risk of minimalizing Kermit. Clifford sings the theme song. And audiences were probably like, who the f*** is this guy? Some people also found Clifford to be racist, similar to Roosevelt Franklin.
Did somebody call me by my first and last name? Yeah.
Clifford having dreads and not being a catfish, but more of a humanoid like Scooter. You know, Scooter isn't really a random monster like Gonzo, but not quite a human like Statler and Waldorf. I've seen people ask, like, wait, what animal is Elmo, or what race is Ernie? Well, the answer is that it's just monster in orange. The reoccurring Muppet design absurdity is only questioned with Gonzo adding another layer to his character of being insecure about his appearance and unsure of his identity. Clifford is part of the whatever genre Muppet species, and some people found this as a stereotypically black design, even though once again was played by a black person. He was poorly received as host and arguably offensive, so he disappeared not long after Tonight. He has a speaking role in the Muppets Celebrate Jim Henson, and I have to admit, seeing him amongst much more beloved characters is a little off-putting. Blood thinky on the team. Additionally, there were later allegations of sexual abuse against Kevin Clash, and Clash would resign from Sesame Street in 2012. There were 3 sexual abuse charges that were dropped, so nothing was ever proven. That shit happens a lot in Hollywood, and of course the outcomes of cases are always up to debate. But whether he's guilty or not, Clash's reputation isn't the cleanest. Yet another nail on Clifford's coffin. Clifford would also appear on Channel Awesome's Top 5 Worst Muppets list, next to Robin the Frog, what the fuck? Also next to Pepe, what the fuck? Speaking of, Pepe was easily the most notable of the original characters created for Muppets Tonight. Other characters created for the new ensemble include Seymour, the theater elevator who was often seen with Pepe, Johnny Fiamma, a crooner Sinatra insert, and Fiamma's pet monkey bodyguard Salmonella, Howard Tubman, a rich pig with his butler Carter, Bobo the Bear, a less cartoonish bear who is the security guard of the Muppet Theater and is an upgraded design of the bear family that Fozzie meets in Manhattan. Bill the Bubble Guy, the guy who has one talent, shooting bubbles from his head. The punching bag of the group, a fill-in for Scooter. Dr. Phil Von Neuter, a mad veterinarian. And Spamela Hamderson, a parody of Pamela Anderson's role in Baywatch. Not that shit reboot with nothing but dick jokes.
My front bump. You got it. Huge dick. Big dick.
With a reoccurring sketch of Bay of Pigs Watch, similar to the Pigs in Space reoccurring segment, but parodying Baywatch. Pigs in Space was brought back with a sequel reoccurring segment titled Pigs in Space Deep Dish 9, seemingly a homage to Star Trek's various following series and creative interpretations after the original. Leonard Nimoy himself even making a cameo.
Excuse me, Miss Piggy, but that's where you're wrong. I believe it was episode 12 where the Enterprise was invaded by an evil race of super intelligent bubbles.
No wonder you were canceled.
There is also a noticeable edgier tone, as this was the 90s, an era where the standards of what you could do on television was being shifted thanks to shows like Ren and Stimpy, South Park, and Beavis and Butthead, in addition to fulfill the original vision of the Muppets having a primarily adult demographic. It is a little dated with its 90s edge, but it is not a huge issue. Also a little dated is some of the parody humor.
I don't understand the concept of changing. Why do they call it changing? My parents say they're going to change me, but then after they do, I'm exactly the same.
Hey, Jerry, Elaine, am I going bald? Because I think I am.
Baby Jerry, can I borrow some spare formula?
Help yourself.
Giddy up.
Other parodies include E.I.E.I.OR, a parody of ER featuring Fozzie as a veterinarian, which is similar to the reoccurring sketch of Veterinarian's Hospital on The Muppet Show, but taking a further parody approach. Yet another veterinarian segment, Tales from the Vet, a parody of Tales from the Crypt, a reoccurring segment hosted by Dr. Phil Von Neuter. Rolf has one speaking line in the Garth Brooks episode. But when I Rolf being played by Bill Barretta, who would not speak consistently with Rolf for a fat minute, but he does a great job, and Barretta's Rolf is one of the strongest vocal recreations of a Muppet character. And a black and white picture of Scooter can be seen in the Tony Bennett episode, seemingly in memoriam of Richard Hunt. It's an enjoyable show, but its largest issue is its inferiority to the original. The magic of the previous cast being seemingly uncapturable. The new cast additions not holding a candle to the original ensemble. Unfortunately, the show bombed and only got 2 seasons as a true testament to its unfamiliarity. Having Kermit and other familiar faces be secondary is a risk I absolutely commend, but sadly it did not pay off with general audiences. Like I said, the show is a passing of the mic, and maybe if earlier episodes focused more on familiar characters, the new Muppets could have been more well-liked by audiences from being surrounded by familiar characters to get their attention. Due to its failure, it's only available unofficially, including YouTube, and if you're a diehard, it's worth watching. It's a gem, but not the shiniest gem. So after that bomb, and not the previous 2 movies not being the biggest hits, Brian Henson signed a deal with Sony to help produce family movies, potentially limiting collaboration between the Henson Company and Disney.
You know what? Keep the chair. My gift to you.
Thanks, Mike.
Sony had also previously helped by distributing Manhattan and Space. So that's why they're not on Disney Plus if you haven't noticed. Speaking of space, the concept of Muppets from space was seemingly conceived out of the retelling adaptations not being the most viable upon release. So Muppets from Space was intended to be less apeshit and more back to basics, since it had been long enough to see earlier projects benefit from simplicity, especially considering the sheer ambition of the previous 2. With one of the original ideas being a rescue mission with Kermit being abducted by aliens, so the rest of the Muppets have to go away from Earth to get him back, parodying the sci-fi genre throughout. But this was altered to make a more character study-oriented direction, making a full movie out of what was suggested in the musical number I'm Going to Go Back There Someday from the Muppet movie, representing the character's acceptance of loss but refusal to end the journey. The song was beloved enough to be performed at Henson's memorial, so the true concept of the film was expanding on a suggestion from a beloved musical number. So how'd it turn out? Incredibly half-baked. Gonzo is insecure about his lack of identity for no reason. Specifically in relation to the plot, he just is, even if that aspect of his character being insecure had been established prior. Hence to why he was chosen for the part of the direction, but context still matters. There's not very much drama surrounding his insecurities. He looks at pictures and notices he's alone and that's it. Although the joke of Gonzo having a nightmare where he's rejected from Noah's Ark is pretty funny. The narrative not really being evolved through anything, the lack of original musical numbers being incredibly distracting, retaining licensed music and occasional jukebox music covers. Now, of course, the Muppets are accustomed to cover songs, but they were never used throughout the feature films, and few covers throughout are distracting. There is a consistent theme of a funk music soundtrack, trying to do that entire 70s Mothership Connection funk style theme, too combined with some of the alien aesthetics. So at least the genre of the sound design is consistent, but no original songs and only a handful of covers. It's an incredibly narratively devolving decision. Wait, was this just done to save money to sell a soundtrack because Sony owns all that music probably? The film isn't poorly shot, a lot of the highlights are nice, but it lacks a lot of the actual grit from previous projects.
Oh, brother.
It's also a very 90s movie, but not for the better. There's a general modernization for the time, which makes it very dated. It's kind of similar to the Looney Tunes show released in 2011, placing the characters in a modern suburban lifestyle.
1 second.
1.
I said I'm coming.
What happened to this country? No one hustles anymore. That's why Canada's killing us these days.
Not all the modernization is bad, though. It actually does incorporate a family dynamic that was kind of lost with previous projects. The 90s humor, however, is oddly edgy. It's a bigger issue here than in Muppets Tonight. In fact, spiritually, it feels more like the Muppets Tonight movie. But Muppets Tonight is inferior, but this is just a slog to get through. And I say kind of a Muppets Tonight movie because some of its prominent characters are in this film, Blood, Thinky on the team. Can't even really give it points for being consistently funny. There's so little actual sci-fi, and it does retain the rescue mission of the original concept and heist parody aspects, but it's incredibly lame. Overall, lacking its balance between heart and humor, since the Gonzo identity crisis really doesn't get enough screen time on top of just a flawed concept. The film conceptually answers a question that doesn't really need to be answered, Gonzo being an alien, and not really doing the theme of self-acceptance very prominently. I only laughed twice upon rewatch, also Rolf cameo. Scooter pops up in the background a few times and has one speaking line.
Get your Gonzo t-shirts right here, $10.
Both characters' roles are still reduced for the moment. Also, Rob Schneider cameo, baby! I know it has its defenders, and I respect many of its creative risks, the source material of Muppets Tonight, but a majority of the decisions done to shake up the formula suck ass. The movie also performed horribly, which could be attributed to the general brand in decline and the quality of the film itself. Although, like Manhattan, it is a divisive entry. I don't think any long-running franchise doesn't have a divisive entry. It's not a complete pile of shit, but it's very half-baked. This wasn't the only 1999 Muppet box office bomb. Later that year, The Adventures of Elmo and Grouchland released 3 years too late, if you ask me, and it's not a bad preschool movie. It doesn't treat kids like idiots, which I argue matters most in any piece of preschool media. It's not worth getting mad over. Some of the songs are solid, but it's definitely inferior to Follow That Bird. Sesame Street was definitely past its peak in quality by the 90s, if you ask me. It's fine, maybe a hot take, I don't know.
So are those two married right now? Right there? Gordon and his wife. Imagine one day, like, I don't know, whatever, Cookie Monster's walking down the street and he looks in, like, their window on Sesame Street and, like, they're f***ing each other. Or Gordon's eating her out. He's got his mustache and her pussy. Cookie Monster's looking in the window and Gordon's eating her pussy and Gordon's like, I'll show you how to eat a cookie. Ah!
But The Muppets being a beloved family franchise with an underperforming installment is often a death sentence in Hollywood. With being given less money, quality control is no longer retained when you're a household name. Studios want your money, but don't want to spend the money to do the IP's justice. It's enough to keep the train chugging, but with very little money. Franchises often refuse to die and can continue without big budget projects. So it was apparent that the Muppets weren't going to the movies for a very long time. What did we get with the boss gone and no money? Well, the Muppets weren't given the death sentence, but given the life support sentence, which is arguably a fate worse than death. Dare I say, I've been coming down with a serious case of the Hollywood blues.
I'm so happy.
Kermit Swamp Years is a steaming pile of f***ing dog that makes me want to Kermit suicide. Now, let me elaborate. Half-baked, steaming pile of f***ing dog I wonder if Shrek had anything to do with its conception. Man, kids are really into swamps nowadays. Why else did we get green Twinkies? One of my earliest memories ever was trying the Shrek 3 Minty Mud Bath Milkshake at McDonald's. This film was actually shot at Disney MGM Studios, now Disney Hollywood Studios, but Sony owns and distributed the film under Sony Wonder, now known as Sony Pictures Kids Zone. So I guess Disney wanted nothing to do with it, considering the Muppets had both underperformed with Disney and Sony. And let me repeat, Disney in the 2000s wanted nothing to do with this movie. And Kermit Swamp Years came out the same year as Cinderella 2, Dreams Come True, Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, and Tarzan and Jane. This would have fit right in. How did Disney not want this? The Henson Company had next to nothing to do with it beyond legal recognition and casting. Like I said, From Space was pretty half-baked. Jerry Jewell was one of 3 writers on Space, and that film had some substance. Space would be Jewell's last writing credit, as he passed away in 2005. Another explanation to the arguable consensus of a quality dip in writing. The film does have the normal puppeteer team at the time, thankfully including Steve Steve Whitmire as younger Kermit and adult Kermit. This does exclude Frank Oz, as his role was limited after Christmas Carol from scheduling conflicts. But after this point, he would not consistently puppeteer on Muppet projects. He had to dub his lines in for Treasure Island and Space, so it was only a matter of time before he took his entertainment career elsewhere.
Sorry, Wazowski, but Randall said I'm not allowed to fraternize with victims of his evil plot.
Look, Dad, there's a bear.
No, Christine, that's a frog. Bears wear hats.
Jerry Nelson also stopped appearing in projects around the early 2000s due to his failing health. With the exception of the occasional Sesame Street appearance, this also applies to Frank Oz returning on occasion to Sesame Street, while other performers Eric Jacobson would replace Oz. Nelson's characters' roles were reduced, but Nelson did voice act to combat health restrictions. Up until 2012, when Nelson would pass away and he was fully replaced by Matt Vogel. His recasting allowing more appearances of his characters. Around Y2K, a time of the Muppets being on life support, also coincidentally and unfortunately marked the beginning of the end for most of the original cast members. But Kermit's swamp years is an absurd loss of identity for the franchise. This is a common thing that happens on franchise life support. Familiar characters just get inserted into random scenarios. So like, it's a prequel to the Muppet movie about Kermit living in the swamp. The title is actually contradictory to the plot. The actual plot is about Kermit's first experience in the surrounding real world. And this concept may seem odd because of the franchise continuity issues, but there's never been an attempt at franchise continuity. The Muppet movie showing the characters meeting, contradicting Muppet babies in Manhattan and every other non-movie within a movie, etc. However, Kermit's family has been seen previously on multiple instances besides Channel Awesome's Worst Muppet List with Robin the Frog. But besides Robin, they've never been prominent characters. I guess they just looked at his family's other appearances and were like, F it, let's make a movie out of that. Hey kid, you like Kermit? Here's a movie about nothing but him, F you. This movie does not even seem to understand the logic of the Muppets. The Muppets just being a form of life that casually coexists with mankind and isn't supposed to be questioned, but they're never treated like animals. This movie makes Muppets animals and not another accepted member of their society. A distracting inconsistency in the basic premise of the characters. Basically just doing whatever, even if the characters weren't designed for this scenario. Like in parentheses movie 79, Doc Hopper never wants to eat Kermit because he's an animal. He just wants him to promote cannibalism for his company. So here the random scenario contradicts the premise of the characters. Like a lot of direct-to-video garbage like Kung Fu Magoo, a Mr. Magoo action movie, or Garfield's Pet Force, Garfield Superheroes. How could we forget the various Tom and Jerry movies that are just retellings of pre-existing movies but with scenes of Tom and Jerry randomly spliced in between familiar plot points? This featuring the plot of Kermit's childhood friend Goggles being captured by a pet store owner and obtained by a high school science teacher who likes to dissect frogs. There's only animal Muppets in this film, and they're treated like actual animals in universe. And since it is a Kermit prequel, other Muppets aren't relevant to the story. However, some of the characters are alluded to in some of the most distracting and insulting fan service I've ever seen. Animal is a keychain. Statler and Waldorf are turtles, I think.
The frogs are fighting. I hope they're fighting. I shelled out a lot for this skybox.
But actual Statler and Waldorf de-aged make a cameo, them being the only non-animal Muppets. So are they considered animals too? Miss Piggy is a live-action pig. They didn't even make all the animals puppets. And Kermit meets a kid who lives at the Henson residence. So is that supposed to be young Jim Henson? And Kermit was a fictional character he created after this frog? The credits literally says that young Jim Henson. Why create a fictional in-universe explanation as to how Kermit the turquoise monster turned frog became a character? What a confusing middle finger to the audience. Also, shitty CG, shitty toilet humor like Kermit's childhood friend flashing his ass twice.
Well. If it isn't the Soggy Pants Brothers.
Oh, yeah, well, we ain't
brothers, see?
And we don't even wear pants. Look. See?
Did you just moon me, wart face?
No, I was just showing you my pantless behind.
Well,
A nerd character, a bully character, a talking dog. Yeah, there's a talking dog that is sometimes a Muppet and sometimes live action. Like, just make it one or the other. The Muppet strings are seen on tons of instances. In fact, the entire plot feels like it was designed around to require the least amount of puppeteers as possible. Although there are some scenes with a lot of frog Muppets moving. The entire movie also forgetting the concept of the Muppets being entertainers. The Muppet Show showing their entertainment and dumb behind the scenes bullshit because they're entertainers. The Muppet movie is a road trip, sure, but it's to go to Hollywood because they're entertainers. There is one scene where Kermit discovers movies and he decides he wants to be in them. Fuck it. Like, it actively feels like a ripoff. It does so little in relation to the source material and butchers any original elements because it's all f***ing cliche crap. Oh yeah, it ain't over, motherfuckers. The motherfucking saga continues for the Muppets in 2002 because later that year, we also got It's a Very Merry Muppet Christmas Movie, or as I like to call it, the Muppet Shitty Generic Holiday Special, airing on NBC. Just look at the DVD cover, you can tell how shitty and boring it is. The characters aren't doing anything exclusive to the narrative. They're like in Christmas attire and on a Christmas background. The title is so vague, like, what happens on Christmas? The film is simultaneously a generic Save the Rec Center movie, Christmas special, and It's a Wonderful Life parody. A clusterfuck with 2 extra cliches. Now, like I said, the Muppets have had a long history of using simplicity to its benefit to subvert cliches. Here, it appears as if it's cliche because it's lazy. Like, the villain is a big bad corporate villain. Bro thinks she awful be bad.
'Cause I'm awful! I'm awful! Be bad! Oh, get down!
No, literally, the corporation is called Be Bad.
If you need boxes for the move, you can check the back of the liquor store.
Oh wait, it's subverting the genre because it's an evil business woman.
For the record, I consider that flying pig to be a coincidence and not a sign from God.
And an atheist.
God? You're not real! I don't believe in you!
Well, I am real, my son.
Not for long!
The special was directed by Kirk R. Thatcher, who you may know as a puppeteer behind a lot of the creatures from Return of the Jedi. Star Wars easily at its most Muppety. Film is also partially resemblant of Muppets Tonight, with the inclusion of Johnny Fiamma, Sal Howard, but no Clifford. There is like a weird religious angle where Whoopi Goldberg plays God. Now I know it's a Christ Mass movie, and the Noah's Ark joke from earlier, but like, God played by Whoopi Goldberg being a side character viewing the movie is just an odd angle to take. At the beginning of It's a Wonderful Life, the angels in the sky talk, and they're like, oh, fuck it, let's make that part of the plot. As it is partially a Wonderful Life adaptation, just Dick writing Christmas carols adaptational success. It's also a musical, like, sometimes with like 3 songs, 2 of which are covers of Jingle Bells and Santa Baby, and 1 original song which also does get a reprised, which is dog shit, called Everyone Matters.
Everyone matters. Everyone for worse or for better. We can change the world around us.
Okay, fine message, but the lyrics are incredibly lazy. It never tells us why everyone matters. The Wonderful Life adaptation is so lazily tacked on and comes off as nostalgia bait resolution. The entire movie isn't a parody, it just parodies lots of Christmas movies like A Grinch and A Christmas Story as well, but there's nothing clever or transformative about the parodies. It's just throwing Christmas shit at the wall. Muppets Tonight had a little dated parody humor, but this just has atrocious parody humor. There's a scene with a Steve Irwin impersonator. Apparently the late Steve Irwin was supposed to play himself, but couldn't due to scheduling conflicts. But like, it just goes on for way too long and isn't funny.
A permit for a topless nightclub?
Better safe than sorry, okay? Good point.
There is so much just weird sexual humor. Pepe at this era is just severely flanderized. Instead of being interested in the ladies, okay, like, he's just flat out horny. And this was after Disney bought them. How did he get more fucking horny? Did they really have to make Scooter a stripper? In this movie, Pepe wants to fuck the villain.
I love your spirit. Well. Listen to me, my little king prawn king. You answer this question, and I'll give you...
Did Linkara write this?
But Peppy, I want you.
Oh, I want you to.
Why are her feet so close to the camera? I can't even say did Tarantino direct this, because if he did, it probably wouldn't be dog shit. Speaking of dogs and shit, I actually do like one joke, the Triumph cameo.
Muppet movies are always the best.
You mean that?
For me to poop on!
Right, you got me again. Bye-bye.
I used to be obsessed with Triumph when I was like 7. Triumph the Insult Comic Dog was a character first debuting on Conan, the only good living talk show host. He just popped up in a lot of stuff afterward throughout the 2000s.
So what's going on here? You've got a little future nerd in here?
Yes, future nerd, future Jedi.
When is he due?
June 27th, 6 weeks.
Wow. That's the last time you'll ever see female genitalia.
His catchphrase was, "For me to poop on."
Listen to me. The Sopranos is the best, as everyone knows, show on television, yes? For me to poop on.
And it was kind of like an early internet meme. I used to watch For Me to Poop On compilations like all the time, and this crossover cameo is actually pretty clever, nostalgia bias aside. In fact, I used to see this scene a lot in For Me to Poop On compilations.
No! No! I hate you, Muppet!
The ending is Kermit's like, "Oh no, I don't want my friends to work at a strip club." So f it, he's ready for any challenge that comes his way. But then Pepe's like, "Hey, you fucking awful be-bad bitch, you can't do that because there's a piece of paper that makes it a historical landmark. You can't tear down our theater," and limits any chance of the resolution of It's a Wonderful Life of accepting challenge. Given that it came out in 2002, it's very safe to assume that it was in development before 9/11. And in this movie, when it starts getting to the shitty Wonderful Life parody, Kermit is sent into the world where he was never born, and he goes to Piggy's house, and you can see the Twin Towers in her window, meaning that Kermit Kermited 9/11. Why else are the towers in the world where he was never born? That error is legitimately the best thing about this movie. You see, kids, this is why you edit out the Twin Towers of your movies that filmed before 9/11. The film has 0 point to exist, has none of the perfection of Christmas Carol, none of the charm of Family Christmas, none of the charm of the John Denver special, its spiritual successor, the Lady Gaga special as well, and Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, and the Christmas Toy, and the Great Santa Claus Switch, etc. There are so many better Muppet Christmas options than this. After Y2K, the Henson Company was going up in flames. Now, I won't get into all the legal and fiscal bullshit going on at the time, but it was apparent that beyond Sesame Street being on season 35, nothing was really selling. In fact, they decided to sell Sesame Street to Sesame Workshop, the non-profit primarily involved with Sesame Street. But there was one company they could go to for profit, place the boss always wanted. What he would have intended if it weren't for his death.
Sure is swell to see all the Muppets here at Walt Disney World.
And we'll be seeing you soon with more Muppet stuff because that's the way the boss would want it.
So not the entire company and all of their IPs, but the Muppet Show franchise IP specifically was sold to Disney. This excludes their Sony collabs, Sesame Street, Fraggle Rock, etc., the Muppet Show spin-offs only with the exception of the Sony collabs, as well as the rights to the 1997 Disney Junior series, Bear in the Big Blue House, which was airing until 2006 on Disney Channel, Disney no longer only distributing the series, now gaining full ownership. The acquisition fully being completed by 2004. The Henson Company still having full ownership of everything but the Muppets and Sesame Street for the most part. Now, of course, Kermit was on Sesame Street's early years, so Disney does not own those specific appearances. So don't expect to see Croaker the Frog from Kermit's swamp years on a Disney park. They legally can't, probably, I don't know. The Muppets and Bear were bought for $75 million, which is around $124 million in today's money. And if you know anything about showbiz budgeting, that's not a whole lot. What else did Disney drop that year? Well, Home on the Range and The Incredibles, which they own by 2006, so we'll include that. Estimating with inflation, Home on the Range had a $181 million budget and The Incredibles had a $152 million budget. The Muppets had become worth so little that the brand in its entirety was sold for less than the budget of The Incredibles, with inflation. This is nothing compared to the $7.4 million in 2006 Disney bought Pixar for, the extra $4 billion in 2009 money they bought Marvel for, and the $4 billion in 2012 money they bought Lucasfilm for. Now, that might not be the most fair comparison since they bought characters, not a company, but you figured they'd be worth more than less than half the budget of a shitty live-action remake and not even $1 billion. Inflation application or not, the Muppets' price is like half the budget of a mainstream release for the entire IP, and this was once the biggest show on television. This seemingly may have been a revoking of the life support sentence from the Henson Company, and even if Disney wouldn't be doing the hottest again until the 2010s, it was truly another nail in the coffin for the franchise. If Henson could see what Disney would become in the following decades, it would not be what the boss would have wanted. Even with creative supervision from familiar people, it became very apparent very quickly that Disney in the 2000s was not fit for the Muppets. They appeared on Disney Channel and other cheap minored things Disney owned for marketing reasons, but they yet to come back with a mainstream project. It's not like they bought them for billions.
I didn't buy you for billions so you could play around debating!
Actually, Zach Sherwin, they bought the Muppets for less than billions. Multiple projects were attempted, but only one made it through development, seemingly in an attempt to revive the now acclaimed Christmas Carol and Treasure Island. According to Oz, The Wizard of was one of Jim Henson's favorite movies, in addition to the 39 film being one of the most cherished films ever. It being referenced or acknowledged tons of times throughout the Muppet chronology as previously described. The Wizard of Oz is also a favorite of mine. It's one of those movies you can like as a kid, but you truly gotta revisit as an adult to appreciate. I wasn't obsessed with it as a kid or anything, but I did like it. If it was being reran on TNT or whatever, I would watch it. It wasn't a masterpiece in my childhood eyes because I didn't understand it. One problem I had as a kid was that the wizard was just like an old dude and not some mythical figure they'd been hyping up the whole movie and he posed himself as. Now, of course, that's the point. He gives the characters things they had their entire life, so it makes sense that he's not a mythical figure, but I didn't understand that because I was a stupid child. But The Wizard of Oz is in a weird state of public domain hell, where the 39 film that made the property cherished is not public domain. 39 movie is based off the book series Oz, released from 1900 to 1920, written by L. Frank Baum. In the year 2024, all works before 1928 are automatically public domain, in addition to the original book being over 95 years old and L. Frank Baum passing away in 1919, over 75 years ago. However, the 39 film adaptation is not public domain and won't be public domain until 2035, and especially wasn't in 2005, when the Muppets version released. So due to the fact that the original books are so old, you can legally do whatever you want with the World of Oz, just not anything that was exclusively created for the 39 classic. And that actually includes more than you think. Even the iconic ruby slippers aren't public domain.
One time a rooster took a inside the barn. Let's have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Put him up, put him up. Oh, I like to wipe my ass with his tail. It's not my dick, it's my tail.
But because of one of the all-time classic films' source material being public domain, there exist tons of other adaptations made decades later just dick-riding the original success, tricking people into thinking it's an official sequel. People assumed there was a copyright issue surrounding the re-release of the Sesame Street episode 847, but it's a public domain character, and there's nothing legally preventing Margaret Hamilton from playing the character elsewhere. But despite the 39 film being based on a book series, mainly based on the first book, there was never an official sequel. The film wasn't a huge hit in 39, but made bank through tons of theatrical re-releases because of the film's sheer critical acclaim, and the film is older than TV, so when TV came out, it was reran a lot. However, some spins on the source material have reached success, including the Broadway musical Wicked, a musical prequel spin-off about the Wicked Witch of the West. The 39 version isn't even the first adaptation. The oldest surviving movie adaptation is from 1910, created to fulfill a contractual obligation associated with Baum's debt caused by the failure of his theatrical productions, as well as radio plays adapting the Oz books. The 39 version taking notes by making it a musical. The 1910 version is 13 minutes long and Toto is like a dude in a bulldog costume. I did see Disney's Oz the Great and Powerful in theaters as a double feature with either Despicable Me 2 or Iron Man 3 in 2013. I can't remember. What I also can't remember is literally anything about this movie. Return to Oz is somewhat beloved given that it's in the same kids movie subgenre as Labyrinth, being a little creepy in a fantasy world. There is not one, but two Tom and Jerry Oz movies. Also in 2013, I remember seeing trailers for Legends of Oz, Dorothy's Return. The title just screams dick riding because we legally can if we're careful. Can't forget my favorite animated sequel, Wizard of Oz 3, Dorothy Goes to Hell.
Oh no! I'm the sandwich. I'm gonna take you to hell. Right after I shove this cactus up my baloney asshole and vagina!
Keep in mind, Disney does not own the beloved Oz from *39, so with the Muppets trying to retell the story without any of the famous additions, how do they do it? Well, as someone who loves both Oz and Muppets, it's a steaming pile of shit. It is almost as bad as Kermit's Swamp Years. Muppets Wizard of Oz was directed by Kirk R. Thatcher because his last 2 Muppet projects were so great.
Hi there, Mr. Oz. Are you by chance in relation to Frank Oz?
The actual plot of the Muppet Spin is more resemblant of the adaptation, adapting what could be done without copyright infringement. And although the Muppets are well known for song covers, including Wizard of Oz songs mentioned earlier, they were not licensed probably due to hectic fees that Disney would not want to pay considering it's a TV movie. They bought the Muppets for next to nothing, so they wanted to spend no money. The film, much like generic holiday special, is a kind of musical. The songs are so far and few between that it barely evolves the story. The shot composition within the numbers is incredibly limited. The opening number is like a shitty R&B music video pandering to the youth of 2005. One positive is that there was some thought put into the casting. Now, if we compare previous Muppet Wizard of Oz parodies, Dorothy is no longer Miss Piggy and her dog Foo-Foo is no longer Toto, with Scooter no longer being the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow being played by Kermit, which makes more sense given that he's a main protagonist, and because of Scooter's reduced role after Hunt's death. Scooter does get to play the assistant to the wizard here, which is a funny parallel, given that he's still the gopher. Kermit also played the Scarecrow on Muppet Babies. Rolf has previously been Toto because dog, but once again reduced role after the boss's death. Gonzo has consistently played the Tin Thing and Fozzie as the Cowardly Lion. Here, Pepe plays Dorothy's pet prawn. Dorothy, being the main protagonist of the story like previous adaptations, was a human, and she's played by Ashanti, the R&B singer who I guess was popular in 2005 or something. Ashanti's performance sucks. It feels like a celebrity role for advertising and not to enact a familiar face and voice. Miss Piggy plays the witches, and getting to see Piggy as both a hero and a villain is actually a pretty clever decision to take advantage of Piggy's comically bipolar nature. Even some of the minor roles are pretty good choices, like Salmonella as one of the flying monkeys. Clifford has a cameo, which is his last English appearance. The ensemble is used sparingly, it's just that Dorothy's actress sucks and the material the cast has to work with is lazy dog shit. Since Toto is sentient, in this instance he wants women from the wizard, and you guessed it, weird sexual humor again, but this time it's even worse. Johnny Fiamma keeps calling Piggy hot.
She's hot.
Rizzo knows what porn is.
Yeah, how do the producers of Girls Gone Wild do it?
It's a Kermit!
We even get bad CG and weird sexual humor.
Are you sure there isn't anything else I could do you for?
No. You see, I already have a girlfriend. She's a chicken.
Oh. A chicken, eh?
Yeah.
Now, this is actually a reference to the source material. One change the '39 film makes is that the entire ensemble first meets the wizard in his talking head form. In the first book, which the '39 primarily adapts, the characters have to meet the wizard individually, and there's a different physical appearance for each character. Dorothy meeting the head we see in the film. This is seemingly done to condense the film's runtime. The Scarecrow meets the wizard in the form of a bad bitch, but here the Tin Man, played by Gonzo, meets the bad bitch in the form of Camilla. And it's a commendable reference, but it's extremely unfunny. There are also some satirical elements of exclusive elements to the public domain source material. The Scarecrow is given bran flake cereal instead of a diploma, a comedic take on the practical Scarecrow brain he's given consisting of bran pins and needles, which in the '39 is changed to a diploma. Dorothy's slippers are not red, since that's actually trademarked since it was a change in the adaptation. If you've ever wondered why there was no Witch of the South in the film, it's because there's 2 good witches, the Witch of the South and the Witch of the North, contrary to the two evil witches, the East, who dies at the beginning, and the West, the main antagonist of the story. In the movie, the good witch Glinda was a combination of two characters, the two good witches, seemingly to condense source material once again. Since the Witch of the North is only in the beginning and the Witch of the South is only in the end to help Dorothy get back home, the name Glinda was taken from the Witch of the South, with the movie eliminating the South and having Glinda to be the North. But this change creates an issue of why doesn't Glinda help Dorothy go back to Kansas at the beginning of the movie if all it required was the slippers? Which is kind of like an infamous minor nitpick in film history, but it actually has a reason as a result of adaptational changes. And it is kind of mocked here with Dorothy going back to the Witch of the North to meet the Witch of the South, who is still named Glinda, instead of meeting the Witch of the South individually, and mocks the simple solution that the 39 creates. But that is a really f***ing complicated joke. Who the hell is gonna understand that besides shitty internet reviewers? You probably didn't even understand what I just said. These super specific references are commendable, but like, it's not surrounded by jokes any audience member could understand. There is one good joke that doesn't require you to know the source material.
All-powerful wizard.
Why would they think that about you?
You know why? Because I could do this. And
Oh my God.
Like, that's the type of Muppet humor that's been lost by 2005, just little things that catch you off guard. It's a movie where a lot of the pieces are in the right place, but those right pieces don't mean much when it's surrounded by so much dog shit. It's not funny, it's fucking boring, the production value is ass, which is unfortunate because the Muppet casting in source material is great. I genuinely think it could have worked. Like, it has more redeeming qualities than generic holiday special, but it's easily worse because of its prominent negative qualities. It was poorly received because it's a fucking pile of shit, so what were they gonna do next? Well, it became apparent that the amount of money Disney was willing to invest was shrinking. A French Muppet show aired, which was only made in and for French audiences.
Moi, j'étais en train d'écouter mon MP3.
Eh ben oui, mais on reprend là. Dis donc, MP3, je peux écouter, ça a l'air énorme.
Ah ouais, c'est bien. Regarde, on peut écouter de la musique et tout. C'est vraiment absolument cool.
Yes, some random French network got the rights to the Muppets. Disney would never do that now. This might be the one time they've not been greedy over an intellectual property. What the f***? Clifford is in it for his last Muppet appearance ever, not played by Kevin Clash. In fact, none of the team in any department was involved, only one country could watch it, it was a huge flop, so what do they do now? We just f***ing had a generic holiday special. Why do we need another one, also directed by Kirk R. Thatcher? Like, don't harass him on Twitter or anything, but compared to Frank Oz and Brian Henson as a main creative, this guy's creative direction for the franchise sucks ass. That might be Disney's fault for corporate meddling, but often this guy's name on a Muppet project is a red flag. One of the main selling points of the special is Paul Williams. The most legendary Muppet songwriter returned for the special, and the songs are fine. There's nothing to work with. Paulie tried his hardest. Oh yeah, a song about the post office.
Our goal is pure, we're making sure that Santa gets his mail.
Without good material, you can't really expect any further good evolution. It is so shitty and boring that it feels like a Hallmark movie. You remove the Muppets from everything and it would be the exact same movie. The whole thing looks like stock footage. Replace Kermit with a Hollywood white middle-aged man and you couldn't tell the difference. It's only 45 minutes long, thankfully, but sometimes a short runtime is a testament to laziness. It's half the runtime of the previous generic holiday special, but quadruple the fucking vanilla. Whoopi Goldberg is back, not appearing as God this time, but she sure carries the spirit of the first generic holiday special, also directed by Kirk R. Thatcher. Boring, lazy corporate garbage with fine songs, that's all this is. On the bright side, however, the following year in 2009, there was an official Muppet YouTube channel, which actually managed to make good original YouTube videos. Taking advantage of the Muppets' familiarity with comedic short-form content, kind of like The Muppet Show, but not part of full episodes and with no celebrities. The channel was mainly for advertising projects, but the original YouTube content was not only great marketing to get trailers in your feed and whatnot, but just genuinely good content. The videos are very well produced for a Disney internet show budget. The Muppets' cover of Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody being a huge hit with 178 million views, probably their most viewed thing in 10 years. It's more of a flat-out parody than a cover, but it's hilarious. I love the entire verse about the protagonist confessing murder to his mother being censored, with Animal realizing that he lost his mama, like physically lost his mama. With it being more of a parody, the censorship of the violent nature of the original song is clever and hilarious. The music videos understood the transformative nature of the song covers of the original show, perfectly building a sketch around the song. The Electric Mayhem and Sam Eagle's cover of Kool and the Gang Jungle Boogies is another standout. Since the song consists of instrumentals and one lyrics, Sam disapproves of the nonsense lyrics but joins in over the course of the song, making a fun sketch in tune with the characters' personalities. Unfortunately, the videos kind of stopped trying after 2017 or so, with the primarily non-advertising content being Muppet Thought of the Week, which was just lazy one-off jokes being spammed until they ran out of ideas. Then the channel died with only occasional e-card-like messages like, "Merry Christmas, it's the Super Bowl." It's barely even used for marketing in recent years as of 2024. The good YouTube videos are some of the best Muppet fully Disney created content, and that's not a good thing since it's short form YouTube videos, but they're good by themselves when they try. But it had been apparent that the Muppets had been broken down to its most bankable aspects. They didn't disappear because they made too much money, but not enough money for Disney. But there were two men who realized what the characters had become, and it was their goal to turn it around. Jason Segel from How I Met Your Mama and British-American filmmaker Nicholas Stoller. James Bobin would end up directing the movie, and believe it or not, they somehow convinced Disney to dump $45 million into the Muppets. And that's more money than they'd seen in a long time. And this would end up being the first Muppet theatrical release since 1999. It had been long enough for nostalgia value, something Disney truly loves. The title of the comeback would be completely f***ing stupid. The Muppets. I've often heard the film referred to as Muppets 2011, so I'll call it that, since Disney didn't want to subtitle it themselves.
Sort of a creative producer with them, working alongside the two executives who I spoke to, where I would have been really a part of the day-to-day decision-making on the Muppets.
So how did the soft reboot of sorts turn out? Holy shit! It's not shit. It's f***ing great, actually. Not perfect, but it's way better than you'd expect considering the state of the franchise, you know, a generic holiday special 2 type shit. It's a genuine miracle of a film. The movie being benefited from its brutal honesty, evolving the plot in other aspects. It acknowledges that nobody has given a shit about the Muppets for the past 20 years or so, with the limited success of the 90s and all the B-movie garbage of the 2000s. And even if it had only been 3 years since their last project, excluding YouTube videos, with generic holiday special 2, nobody f***ing watched that shit. For most adult audiences, it was probably the first time they saw these characters for a fat minute, and most kids, it was probably their introduction. Working excellently as an introduction and reintroduction, depending on your age in 2011. Something the characters needed after not being the most viable after the boss's death. This movie fulfills that need. The movie featuring an off-screen breakup of the ensemble as an allegory to their in-real-life decline in popularity, getting the gang back together, and even having Rolf and Scooter at their most prominent roles since Hunt and Henson's deaths. The story is cliché, but to its advantage, a successful attempt at reviving the storytelling tone and humor of the Muppets in their prime. It actually uses many of the same clichés as generic holiday special, including a corporate villain raising money to save the theater. But it doesn't appear as a rehash because generic holiday special is cliché because it's lazy. Muppets 2011 is purposely simple to benefit the tone of previous beloved projects and expand its general audience appeal. In addition to be a rare instance of great fan service throughout, something I can't say for most franchises. From little things like Gonzo going back to his toilet roots or cameos from obscure Muppets, to the even more obvious recreation of the original Muppet Show as the Muppet Telethon. Using the show within a movie incredibly sparingly, the highlight being the barbershop quartet version of Smells Like Teen Spirit being a transformative cover with a sketch being built around it. Similar how you don't have to know the history of the Muppets to enjoy the Muppet movie, and its comical oversimplification of history, you don't have to understand any of the real-world allegories or fan service to enjoy this movie. The greatest strength of the film is its amount of risk that it takes creatively, including the main characters not really being the Muppets, but New Edition, Walter, and Jason Segel and Amy Adams' characters, Gary and Mary. The only disadvantage of its brutal honesty being the ending, which happens in the credits of the film, which was probably just Disney corporate meddling, let's be real. They shouldn't have not gotten their theater back, but at least had the advantage of a dedicated following, even if it wasn't enough, and each other's back, together with their new pal Walter. Concluding with optimism rather than victory Mercury could have benefited the slightly ironic nature of the Life is a Happy Song reprise to conclude the film, being more resemblant of the real-world struggles of professional art that Manhattan used so sparingly. In addition to the heart and humor balance that had been missing throughout the 2000s in all the instances of emotional moments failing miserably. This extends to the musical numbers. Some songs like Me Party and the villain song Let's Talk About Me just outright suck, but the good ones are really good. They were written by the musical comedy duo The Flight of the Conchords, an advantage to having experienced comedy musicians involved. Let's Talk About Me feels like a Nostalgia Critic sketch. It's bad at being bad on purpose. The irony is intentional and the jokes don't land, so it's not a delicious irony, so it's not funny. The song is severely cut down in the film, and even if the song sucks, every verse should have been included. Thankfully or unthankfully, the full song is on the soundtrack. Not a good song, but provides a villain motivation that could have bettered the narrative. It was probably Disney excluding it Christmas Carol style because it's not about Muppets and they think kids are stupid. But the good songs, however, are fucking amazing. Man or Muppets won an Academy Award for Best Original Song. It is the most ridiculously overdramatic song I've ever heard, perfectly combining the heart and humor, better than any other Muppet song that tries to do both. Typically, there's sad songs and funny songs. This is both perfectly. However, it only had one competitor, Real in Rio from Rio. Yeah, remember Rio? The song is amazing, but there was no competition, but the song is amazing. Pictures in my head and the reprise of Rainbow Connection capturing the heart of the movie. Including Rainbow Connection in this movie could have come off as nostalgia bait pandering, and it's a risk that pays off because it's shockingly used incredibly sparingly. It works great as an alternative version, a Piggy Kermit version, a duet version, a Steve Whitmire version, but succeeds narratively with the attempt at the Muppet Telethon being an attempt for a reunion. It makes sense to do something familiar on top of concluding Animal's character arc in the film, which is very nicely wrapped up. Animal getting an identity crisis subplot, which is a perfect little shitpost arc for a shitpost character. I love how it satirizes much of the children's entertainment garbage of the 2000s. And this came out in 2011, so we are still kind of in the era of like Alvin and the Chipmunks, the Squeakquel type kids movies, you know, just lazy garbage banking on nostalgia. This entire movie could have been nostalgia bait garbage, but it's not. It's genuinely good fan service, and it's especially better than any right than it had to be. It's not a very technically impressive movie. Some of the effects aren't impressive at all and look like complete shit. At the end of the day, it is a 2010s Disney movie. It's not poorly shot in general, but there's none of that like grit or technical wizardry like previous movies. It's not perfect, but the highs are ridiculously high, and that true effort to revive the franchise was very apparent. It actually feels like the effort that the boss would have wanted. The film was a huge hit, but who didn't like it? Frank Oz. Oz in the 2010s onward has been very publicly critical of the current state of both the Muppets and Sesame Street. Not long after this movie, Oz would make his last guest puppeteer appearance on Sesame Street in season 43 in 2013.
I have something exciting to tell you!
Oz's statement on 2011 included, "I thought there was some wonderful things in it, but in general, I started to vomit when things get over sentimental and sweet. It's all because Disney doesn't understand purity." And if he's referring to the ending being a little too happy-go-lucky, then I agree. I don't think 2011 suffered from a lack of Manhattan-like realism throughout. There's enough honesty, the ending just sucks ass. Speaking of ending and sucking ass, why the fuck is there a Cars 2 poster in the background? The film was a huge hit, the biggest box office hit for the Muppets. It was quadruple the budget, although not accounting for inflation. After its theatrical run, it apparently sold over 500,000 DVDs in 2012. I think the trio of Jason Segel, Nicholas Stoller, and James Bobin were great bosses of the franchise. A Henson substitute is integral for any Muppet project, and that trio filled the Jimmy Choo. The Muppets were back. However, in 2013, something took the family entertainment world by storm. Snowstorm. Frozen. The first Frozen made $1.2 billion, and as somebody who was in elementary school when it came out, it was a huge deal. Due to Frozen's heavy marketing and success, it arguably overshadowed the next Muppet project, which released 5 months after Frozen. Muppets Most Wanted was greenlit shortly after 2011's success as an official sequel, the original title being The Muppets Again. In fact, it's referenced in the film.
It's the Muppets again, with the Muppets again.
But again, that is a really unspecific title to follow, a flaw with the previous. Muppets Most Wanted being a much better name because it's actually distinguishable. Much of the crew returned for the follow-up besides Jason Segel, stating that it was his mission to revive the franchise and he succeeded with his mission. After all, he is an actor first and he didn't do everything. So the Muppets were seemingly in good hands of Nicholas Stoller and James Bobin. Despite being acknowledged as a direct sequel, it really isn't. Which isn't really an issue from a narrative perspective. The movie isn't about Gary and Walter's relationship and takes a similar direction to Great Caper and Treasure Island of a pure comedy sequel. Although Walter is still a prominent character, so there's one consistency between the two films. And the plot does take advantage of the Muppets' re-rise to stardom at the end of the movie. A plot point that fortunately parallels what actually happened in real life. The show within a show movie element is also retained, with the Muppets performing old school Muppet shows live and done well once again. The direction also being similar to Great Caper with its heist elements and genre bending and subversion of cliches, being a doppelganger story with spy elements and a comedic musical. In fact, it's kind of like Cars 2, being a sequel with a world tour and familiar characters and spy elements, but not dog shit and logical as a direction. It's not perfect and it's not better than its predecessor, but I've noticed that it is a movie that is divisive amongst fans, much like Manhattan, and I think is far overhated. I agree with many of the common criticisms against the movie, but I don't think they're as detrimental to the quality and my overall enjoyment. As a pure comedy, it is one of the funniest, the humor easily being its greatest strength. It does not take any risks for its story, however, and I understand much of the disappointment surrounding this movie. Given the flaws of both, it's kind of a pick your poison situation. Not making a doppelganger plot heartfelt was a good decision because the characters have to be a little stupid to realize that Kermit has been replaced by Constantine, the world's most dangerous frog. Constantine easily being the most memorable villain in Muppet history.
Not so fast.
Where's Kermit? What do you want?
You have walked your last walker, bear.
A fellow Muppet is rarely the antagonist of Muppet conflicts. You know, like, besides, like, stupid-ass Wizard of Oz off the top of my head. Constantine was performed by Matt Vogel, and his performance is perfectly off. The amount of work put into Constantine's Kermit impression getting better as he impersonates him is a commendable and constant evolution. The little details like him thinking it's Sesame Street and getting the characters' names wrong, plus his puns are just really funny references. The way that Sam Eagle is incorporated as an anti-hero police officer is a really clever way of making a familiar character an obstacle in the plot given his pre-existing disapproval of the Muppet shenanigans. The soundtrack was only written by half of the Flight of the Conchords, Brett McKenzie. The songs here are more consistent in quality, even if there is less narrative risk to build around. There is one attempt at a dramatic number, Something So Right, which is a great song but does provide a slight tonal inconsistency. However, We're Doing a Sequel and the Interrogation Song are comedic masterpieces communicating the spirit of the bosses and Jerry Jules' vision perfectly. We're Doing a Sequel being a perfectly meta number mocking Hollywood and its absurd sequels despite being one, in the process foreshadowing the atrocious film and concept that is Toy Story 4. Roasting The Godfather 3, the plot of the movie only being half decent, acknowledging that it's the 8th movie, it's perfectly meta, logical, and hilarious. The half-decent plot part is unintentionally true, as I do think the actual cracking of the case, discovering Kermit's been replaced, doesn't get enough focus. The interrogation song excellently translates the previous events of the movie with bickering between the officers with rhyme schemes that are clever. It's a lyrical wonder how it was structured coherently and relevantly and not have a forced rhyme scheme. It's shot like an actual interrogation too, which is a funny combination with the absurd imagery of the Muppets. The technical quality is still inferior to its predecessors. Given that it is an action plot, there is a lot more effects and once again not great, still a 2010s Disney movie. But hey, Constantine has a gun. Muppets with guns are based. It also has Diddy. The film has an extended version, but the theatrical version is only 107 minutes long, but the extended is 119 minutes long. Like, what's the point of a 12-minute extended version? To sell DVDs? Probably. It's not really an extended version, it's the actual filmmaker's vision version. The no Disney corporate meddling cut. Almost 2 hours is a pretty reasonable runtime. I know children do have short attention spans at the end of the day, but 2 hours? If you can get the extended version, it's better because there's more jokes and a little less of a breakneck pace. It's not on Disney Plus currently. The interrogation song, the funniest part of the movie is entirely cut down by an entire Gonzo verse? Like, why remove an entire verse of the song? But no, the extended movie version isn't even the full song either. On the soundtrack version, the Swedish chef's interrogation goes on for longer and it's hilarious. So the pointless extended edition doesn't even have the full song numbers. What the f? If Disney could do it in 92, they could do it in 14. The film has some serious flaws. I get why people tend to dislike it, but I think the Muppets were done an effortful justice once again. However, the movie bombed, which was unfortunate because it was a worthy successor, but it was apparent that the Muppets' brief renaissance was over. It was arguably overshadowed as a family movie since it came out 3 days after Frozen's DVD release, as well as the unexpected hit of the Lego Movie had just come out prior.
Y'all ready for this? Oh no, they were ready for that.
It also just wasn't as good, even if I do defend the movie. This is what the evil Kermit meme originated from, and I don't blame you if you didn't know that. And the right hands James Bobin and Nicholas Stoller were never involved with the Muppets again, although James Bobin claimed he wanted to revive the original Muppet Show. I imagine Disney didn't trust them since they failed financially. So where do they go? Back to DVD hell. Well, not quite yet, but back to TV. In another TV show, but not the revival of the classic James Bobin wanted, just with a show titled The Muppets. What a shitty title. Fitting because this show is a steaming pile of shit. Well, if you put somebody in charge of the characters that has zero understanding of the characters, it's a death sentence since it's such a character-oriented intellectual property. So who was the boss this time? Bill Prady and Bob Cushel. Bill Prady actually being experienced with the Muppets since he worked on the Muppet Celebrate Jim Henson, the Fraggle Rock animated series, the Jim Henson Hour, Muppet Classic Theater, Muppet Vision 3D, the Muppet interactive video cassettes, and Muppet Sing-Along Billy Bunny's animal songs.
I'm the Earl of eating, and it bears repeating that the food had better beware. When my mouth is drooling, hey, this ain't no fool. I'm a very, very hungry young bear.
So a very Muppety resume, but not a great Muppet resume. And on top of that, the executive producer of The Big Bang Theory and Young Sheldon, Ruh-roh. The other creator, Bob Cushel, being an executive producer on a bunch of sitcoms I've never heard of, excluding Malcolm in the Middle and American Dad. So you want to know why this show sucks? Bazinga! The Muppets 2015 took an approach of a mockumentary sitcom style, which was a popular format in the mid-2000s to the mid-2010s. The show is being structured to document the lives of our fictional characters. This includes being shot with lots of shaky cam and having interviews mid-absurdist scenario. It's kind of a divisive subgenre of show, however, I think that could be attributed to the jokes of the popular shows and not really the format. I've really only heard people say The Office isn't funny and never The Office has a bad format, which is a completely different criticism. I do like Parks and Recreation and The Office. They aren't perfect shows, contrary to what every cracker at your local Starbucks will tell you. The Office especially I have gripes with. I understand completely why people hate them entirely. Modern Family, also of the genre, I think is dog shit. I am super nostalgic for Total Drama, an animated spin on the format, but it's dog shit. Here, the Muppets are both poorly written and inserted into a scenario that is distractingly realistic. One of the main events of the series that was included throughout its marketing was that Kermit and Miss Piggy broke up off-screen.
Get your hands off of me. It's a little too late to show that you care now, don't you think? You're the one that broke up with me, remember?
I know, that's
We're
true.
through, finito. I have moved on.
Okay, well, so shall we take it again from the top?
No, we're not starting over. We're through, done, over.
A complete opposite to the will they won't they dynamic audiences are used to, with Kermit having a new love interest, another pig named Denise, making it more of a will they won't they get back together. A heavy emphasis on sitcom-y romance being a recurring type of conflict throughout the series. Romance that the audience is intended to be deeply invested in given its concept. Featuring lots of bizarre Muppet-human relationship conflicts and relationship conflicts between familiar characters. The Muppets' lives after work being one of the main selling points of the show, including their sex lives. One of the main romance conflicts being that Sam Eagle wants to fuck Janice now for all you Samus shippers. Yeah, I guess the all-American patriot wants to the hippie. Much of the character's traits are incredibly Flanderized to the absolute worst, but not really in an obnoxious way, but it's clearly done to fulfill the 22-minute runtime. Fozzie is no longer innocent, and he's just a complete fucking dumbass, and he's incredibly unlikable. There is no childlike innocence to his character.
Sorry, kids. Santa's too sad to do the show tonight. Instead, he's gonna try to figure out what the last 3 months of his life meant.
The dry realism, even more realistic than Manhattan, is an incredibly questionable approach. I guess they listened to Frank Oz's criticisms of 2011 too much. And the show has no clear demographic. It's rated TV PG, there are instances of hell and damn, the characters often drink. But despite taking a more grounded approach to romance, they don't or anything, because it's still a child-appropriate show, but it's a wee bit edgier.
Boy toy. Trust me, Scooter. You are a boy toy.
But who is this show for? Now, of course, its intention is to replicate the boss's vision of the Muppets being for adults, a motive that's shifted by better having significant adult appeal through absurdist dialogue and whatnot.
You know, I really like that.
Yep, me too.
Are we in the right theater?
With some colorful characters and absurdist slapstick for the children. They work as adults realistically. Seeing them with smartphones and drink constantly is cursed. There is the occasional good joke, however, like the Swedish chef singing Rapper's Delight. The celebrity appearances are weak, with the exception of Jack White, who does a great rendition of Stevie Wonder's You Are the Sunshine of My Life. Walter is noticeably missing, and I don't know if that was a purposeful exclusion. That could be attributed to Walter's performer, Peter Linz, not really being involved with the Muppets at the time besides Walter. But Walter being missing is a perfect allegory for the dip in quality between Most Wanted and 2015. The series was incredibly poorly received with one season because it was an insulting pile of shit, and there was one person who was particularly critical of it. Not Frank Oz, but Steve Whitmire. Steve Whitmire apparently gave notes to the writing and directing staff of Muppets 2015, which the higher-ups disapproved of any criticism.
Usually the only drama that we see with the Muppets is between Kermit and Miss Piggy, but the man who was given the voice to Kermit for decades has been fired by the Muppet studio, leaving the character's fate hanging in the balance this morning.
The last original cast member next to Dave Goelz, Jim Henson's fan-turned-apprentice. The man that voiced Kermit for 27 years was fired for criticizing the creative direction of characters he knew fondly. Criticisms that Steve Whitmire gave were absolutely justifiable because the Muppets had once again lost their identity. Disney declaring Whitmire's criticism as an act of unacceptable business conduct. He badmouthed Disney, and Disney didn't want to risk losing money. And with the insulting firing of Steve Whitmire, Kermit the Frog himself would lose his identity and spirit harder than any other Muppet. Steve Whitmire did not have an apprentice, given that he couldn't play Kermit forever. Nobody was lined up after him to play Kermit, given his inevitable death or retirement. But the boss's death was unexpected, and they found the right person to fill his roles. And especially the right person, Steve Whitmire, to fulfill his practical alter ego, even if his spin on the character wasn't perfect.
What a good song. I knew you guys could do the tribute for Jim.
I bet Dave Goelz watched this in horror and could do nothing about it, and knowing that he couldn't question any authority given that he'd be out of a job and would further increase the loss of the Muppets' spirit and identity. But Kermit the Frog is too integral to the brand to exclude, unlike Rolf or Scooter. So, who was going to play Kermit? Well, Matt Vogel was cast into Kermit. Matt Vogel was another fan-turned-apprentice. He was the apprentice of both Jerry Nelson and Carol Spinney, playing a ton of minor roles on Sesame Street as early as 1996, but would eventually take over for Big Bird, Floyd Pepper, Uncle Deadly, Crazy Harry, Lou Zealand, Robin the Frog, Sweetums, and would play Constantine in Most Wanted. So the guy known for playing Jerry Nelson characters and not Jim Henson characters took over as Kermit. Matt Vogel's first appearance of Kermit being on these lazy Muppet Thought of the Week videos I mentioned earlier.
It's not that easy. Being stuck on a conveyor belt. See what I mean?
And he sounds like f***ing shit.
Why are there so many
songs about rainbows.
In fact, he sounds like Constantine because it is Constantine. But why make the doppelganger Kermit actual Kermit? His voice is way too deep. Vogel isn't bad at Jerry Nelson impersonations, and I've been pretty tolerant of the voices changing throughout the chronology. But Vogel as Kermit is incredibly distracting and inaccurate. Vogel is not a bad performer at all. Some of his vocal impressions are great, especially Floyd Pepper, but he was not fit for Kermit. Admittedly, over his 27-year run, Steve Whitmire's voice did get deeper from inevitably aging, which happens a lot for people who play characters for decades.
Yes, Mr. Scrooge?
Who is this?
It's Mr. Applegate, sir. He's here to speak to you about his mortgage.
Please, Mr. Listen, relax. We talked about overreacting to things.
It's a code red.
Code red! Oh my God!
Whitmire's aging is noticeable in his last appearances, but it wasn't this distractingly deep. All the inflection and stuff was still there.
Hi ho 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 there! Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays!
And if they couldn't get a new, younger person to voice Kermit, and got a familiar cast member to voice Kermit, Peter Linz would have been a good option since he took over for Ernie in 2017.
Now, first, of course, you are going to need your rubber ducky.
Like, why couldn't they just get current Ernie to play the new Kermit? Walter was gone at this point, it's not like he'd be busy with him. This is especially odd because Kermit is a very popular character to impersonate.
Love you too. Got something for you.
No.
In the year 2024, he probably has more street cred in meme culture than in pop culture.
Sorry, I don't.
I have a reason to believe that Kermit parody videos are more popular than actual Muppet projects from their entire history in 2024. There's this channel called Are You Super Serial, which has more subscribers than the actual Muppet channel. It's like Super Mario Logan, but with Muppets, and I think it's safe to say that there is going to be an entire generation of kids that don't know that Kermit isn't a degenerate character.
I don't want to get out of your room. Yo, bro, call your mom for Valentine's Day. Why, Kermit? I don't want to. I don't care. Nobody cares about stupid Valentine's Day. I need a date. Nobody cares. I want to get laid.
I bet Gen Alpha has seen more Kermit hangs himself videos than actual Muppet videos. Like, how is Kermit's voice in parody videos where he hangs himself better than the actual Kermit's voice? Mad Vogel's Kermit would debut in 2017, but most people would not find out about his voice until 2020. With the first major Muppet project in 5 years. Yes, we got nothing for 5 years. Like the Muppets were used in things, there was a Muppet Babies reboot, like okay, whatever, that's for 4-year-olds, but no big name original projects for 5 years.
Special video for this. Are you ready for this, Kermit?
What are we gonna do?
Today we are making Kermit the Frog drink the gay potion.
The gay potion?
Yeah, the gay potion.
What? It's gonna make me turn gay?
Yeah, it's gonna make the frogs gay.
What? The frog? Am I gonna be gay forever?
No, just for 1 hour, Kermit. You ready?
Oh my frog gestation, do I have to do this?
You have to do it, Kermit. You definitely
have. Pixar and just Disney in general has kind of been a dump the past few years because they are kind of low on ideas right now. I think they're slowly entering another dark age around Pixar's.
Launching Disney Plus in late 2019, it was the end of an era for Disney if you ask me, not just because it was the end of a decade. The 2010s for Disney were a time of a lot of dog shit, but fiscal success. 2019 being Disney's best year financially, but one of their worst years content-wise. The 2020s has been mostly dog shit in its entirety. I can't name 10 acclaimed projects across the entire Disney company. In the past couple years, especially after 2019, their actions absolutely caught up to them and everyone is tired of this mass-manufactured garbage. Disney is absolutely an empire in decline as we speak, but who knows, maybe they'll be able to bounce up back again in the 2030s. Disney dumping billions into Disney Plus shows, like even Willow got a show. Willow. Like, that is desperate. Muppet content was included with the launch of Disney Plus, but wasn't heavily advertised. Lots of promo includes Disney, Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, and National Geographic, but no Muppets, despite being an IP that they own. But the Muppets did get another chance at television. Disney Plus also created an outright industry standard at this point of making TV shows that were more like extended movies. So why not make an extended Muppet movie type show? Announced in 2019, the series Muppets Live Another Day was created by actor Josh Gad, and was supposed to be a direct sequel to The Muppets Take Manhattan and would involve the Muppets looking for Rolf. I assume to create an in-universe explanation as to why Rolf disappeared for a fat minute after Manhattan, which would be the last Muppet movie of the boss's life. Despite the potential issue of Manhattan not being owned by Disney. However, in recent years there have been efforts for Sony-owned Spider-Man media to appear on Disney+, so they could work out a Disney Plus Sony deal of a similar nature with Manhattan in the future. Josh Gad claimed that the series would begin in the 80s and end in the present, which is structurally comparable to WandaVision. Steve Martin, who is previously a Muppet Show special guest and makes a cameo in the Muppet movie, was supposed to be heavily involved. Given that he was around age 74 in 2019, I imagine his insert aging with the characters, as well as any other celebrity insert. Taking advantage of being one of the original Muppet Show special guest stars still alive and active in around 2019. The series was canceled due to creative differences, and who knows, maybe they dodged a bullet from the show being set over multiple decades as an excuse to nostalgia bait. But Disney still needed a Muppet Disney Plus series if that meant more subscribers. So what did we get? Oh, you thought 2015 was bad. The sheer laziness of Muppets Now leaves me speechless. I am also speechless because I am losing my voice. Muppets 2015 was an attempt. A horrible experiment, but an attempt to do something new and subversive. Bazinga. 2015 is legitimately good compared to Muppets Now. It's one of the laziest shows I've ever seen. Muppets Now was made by Kirk R. Thatcher. It is a variety show with a more web show approach, with multiple reoccurring segments. The web show angle is a desperate attempt to pander to the youth, as well as fans of the original show and Tonight. Yeah, guys, we totally made a new Muppet variety show, and I guess that claim is technically true. The segments include Lifestyle with Miss Piggy, a fashion show co-hosted by Uncle Deadly, Okie Dokie Kukin, a Food Network spoof hosted by the Swedish Chef, Muppet Master, a show surprisingly hosted by Walter about discovering other Muppets' talents, Mupp Close and Personal, an interview show with no reoccurring host, Muppet Labs Field Test, a Mythbusters-esque spoof hosted by Bunsen and Beaker, and Pepe's Unbelievable Game Show, that title writes itself. Interluding the various web show segments is Scooter being super epic with technology. Every segment of the show is heavily improvised, and there's none of that off-guard Jerry Jewell dialogue. It only appears to take an improv comedy direction out of sheer laziness, overly relying on celebrities and not actual characters. The improv is incredibly awkward, the celebrities look confused. Zoom call presentation formats are often incorporated, which features lots of just awkward angles. Now, this did come out in 2020 during COVID, but there is often more than one Muppet on screen at once. Using a Zoom-like presentation was not a creative decision to combat creative restrictions, but rather a lazy attempt to be hip with the kids. New character Joe from Legal has a cute design, but that's about it. Clearly just shat out for Disney Plus after the cancellation of Live Another Day. Live Another Day could have just been nostalgia bait garbage, but it was canceled because of creative differences, and creativity is something the franchise in the 2020s lacks. I have a reason to believe it could have been effortful, but I imagine Steve Martin's de-aging technology wouldn't be cheap, and Disney's not really willing to take risks with any of their IPs at this point. Disney had ditched the idea of giving them an extended movie show like the various Marvel and Star Wars Disney Plus series, and their new attempt at a variety show failed because they didn't even try. So what did we get next? Well, over the years there were multiple canceled Halloween specials, something they've never done, but one finally got made. Muppets Haunted Mansion is a 49-minute Disney Plus special. Because Generic Holiday Special 2 was so great, Kirk R. Thatcher returned. I guess he's the one guy that will comply to Disney's corporate meddling for a paycheck. His Disney-approved vision of the franchise hurting the quality once more. Again, it's a miracle 2011 ever happened. Haunted Mansion is one of Disney Parks' most notable attractions. A big-budget spin on the typical county fair haunted house. It's a very lore-intensive ride, having a mythology to many little aspects of the attraction. Its street cred and pop culture is kind of like Five Nights at Freddy's, where the actual horror story second to the gameplay is what keeps the franchise going. Just replace gameplay with ride. The practical stuff in the attraction is cool and all, but what people are really there for are the lore.
It first opened at Disneyland, California in 1969, and despite coming out then, it's not really a 70s horror for adults, but rather a throwback to the conservative horror of the 30s and 40s, which still has a disturbing edge to everything, but it's not like the constant blood and swearing and titties prominent throughout most of the 70s and whatnot. 70s horror catering more toward the prominent youth counterculture of the time. Like Psycho, released in 1960, and it has a scene of a woman in the shower bleeding. There's blood and a woman implied to be naked, like you couldn't do that then. Not one soapy titty in sight, but all the outrage of pornography nonetheless. But one thing about the more conservative horrors of the time is that there was nothing really inappropriate for children, which is a benefit for Disney, a family company. A souvenir that released with the ride in '69 was titled The Story and Song of the Haunted Mansion, featuring an audio drama about teenagers entering the mansion and dealing with its real-world consequences, as well as the studio recording of the musical number in the ride, Grim Grinning Ghosts. The narration being a homage to Vincent Price, who was still alive and would later appear on The Muppet Show as previously mentioned, being resemblant of old radio plays, a throwback to the 30s and 40s, in the 70s. So it has its family appeal of being a little more frightening, but there's nothing worse than you'd find in a mainstream horror movie from the 30s or 40s. Like in the ride, suicide is still implied and whatnot, but, there's no blood or swearing or tits or anything. Not quite PG-13 of a ride. It's PG enough, that's why it's there at Disney. Given that it was a park attraction with a heavy backstory, Disney has tried to capitalize on its lore through movies. Haunted Mansion had a failed film adaptation with Eddie Murphy in 2003, and yet another in 2023. Also failing probably because they released it in August so it could have a theatrical run and be hyped up on Disney Plus by Halloween 23. And Muppets Haunted Mansion is a rare example with a corporate product with some artistic integrity. It's not good, but there is some effort, which is a rarity for Disney in recent years. It's a corporate product with a hint of an art project. The special loosely adapts the story album. In the makeshift radio play, two teenagers enter the Haunted Mansion and encounter the various spirits present throughout the ride, with Gonzo and Pepe entering the Haunted Mansion. Yes, Gonzo and Pepe, not Rizzo. Why not Rizzo? Because Steve Whitmire. Rizzo was removed of speaking roles after Whitmire's asinine firing and has yet to be replaced. Rizzo does make a silent cameo in the special, and there are two lines from two anonymous rats that Rizzo often appears with. But Rizzo does not speak and only gets to throw a bad CG coin at the window.
Look how they massacred my boy.
But the special is incredibly lazy with a bad exposition dump over FaceTime because they have smartphones now. I don't know why they didn't have a Vincent Price-esque narrator. Gonzo is frightened not by the conflict of being frightened by the ghosts, but being afraid of not being viewed as impressive by his fellow Muppets with their ape antics. Having only one Muppet being multi-dimensional here limits the amount of plot. The lack of plot is a blatant issue. There is some character development, but there's not much of a plot. Probably hindered by its limited 49-minute runtime. I assume Disney didn't want to spend the money to make a full movie. That would be double the budget. In fact, if more Muppets beyond Gonzo and Pepe entered the mansion, it could have explored the fears and insecurities of a handful of characters. At least we don't have to hear Kermit's awful voice a whole lot.
Come down to Freddy Fazbear Pizza, Fred Bear Bear.
Given the effect-heavy concept, an actual movie budget would have helped too. Everything in the special looks shitty and fake. Well, almost everything. Which is probably just Disney production standards' fault over anything else. It's very common for Disney to just green screen nearly every background, and I mean like every background, even like walls and shit. There is a very brief blooper videos which shows some of the effects, and like some of the gates and like one wall is practical, but the rest I assume is fake and it looks like shit. To take advantage of the mythologies mentioned 999 spirits, there are tons of Muppet characters brought back, mainly Muppets Tonight Muppets, excluding Clifford obviously. Brian Henson even getting to perform Salmonella, his first performance since Wizard of Oz. I hate the ghost effects. They're far inferior to Christmas Carol. In Carol, Statler and Waldorf were covered in white powder and then superimposed to keep the opacity effect. But here, they just recolored the characters in post and they just added like a ton of blue effects, and like the amount of blue and blur in shots is hard to contemplate when later superimposed. Not helped by the combination of a bunch of lowered opacities in a confined space. Fozzie actually looks fine because he was actually recolored. Like, just make a blue Kermit puppet. Why so much CG on top of superimposing? The bad CG floating skulls and other objects don't help either. The cameo at the end of Haunted Mansion characters Phineas, Ezra, and Gus look like a PS2 game. Maybe more money didn't want to be spent on new puppets since new outfits already had to be made, which at least do a good job of reimagining character designs for the general aesthetic. Kermit resembling Vincent Price. Speaking of Christmas Carol, making Robin dressed like Tiny Tim is an excellent detail. Another positive is the musical numbers, which we hadn't gotten in 7 years. Life Hereafter is actually a pretty great number. Yes, Kermit sings in it, it's a little distracting, but it's pretty clever and fun, even referencing the dialogue that plays when the ride malfunctions. The other songs are fine, nothing great, but fine. The original song from the story album Grim Grinning Ghost is not fully covered, but is sampled in the opening number Rest in Peace, one of the songs being a cover of one-hit wonder King Harvest's Dancin' in the Moonlight. The special sucks, but it's a step in the right direction. There's stuff to admire, but it's over before it begins and suffers from a shoestring budget. It's mediocre, which is rare for the franchise in 2021. So now that we went from one of the worst shows I've ever seen to mediocre, surely the next thing would be good, right? I f***ing wish. The next Muppet project was another Disney Plus show, one more resemblant of their extended movie formats they done with Marvel and Star Wars. An extended movie sounds great until you realize that it's a Disney Plus extended Muppet movie, with The Muppets Mayhem, which is a steaming pile of shit. The Muppets Mayhem obviously focus on Dr. Teeth in the Electric Mayhem. It's not the worst thing the franchise has to offer, but it is a great example of many of the reoccurring issues through Disney in both the 2010s and 2020s, suffering from many of the same issues. The series was created by Adam F. Goldberg, most known for his sitcom based off his childhood, and Jeff Yorks, a film editor, as well as, most interestingly, Muppet performer Bill Beretta. The Electric Mayhem are not multi-dimensional characters, so putting focus on them in an extended narrative gives them so little to actually do conceptually. I do like the characters, but they're designed for one purpose, being a house band for the Muppet Theater. In the movies, they were never really protagonists for a reason. They only do one thing, play music, and do it well. Of the 6 characters, only 3 speak English regularly. Dr. Teeth, Floyd Pepper, and Janice. Zoot does speak proper English, but not as much as his fellow bandmates. Off the top of my head, I can recall him speaking way more in The Muppet Show Season 1, but being more silent as the show progresses. And Animal is a pure comedy shitpost character, and Lips is the Muppet that did nothing for 40 years. As I mentioned 3 hours ago if you're watching the compilation, Lips was not an original cast member. And he does not appear in the Muppet movie, but he does get to sing in special guest Shirley Bassey for a cover of Louis Jordan's Barnyard Boogie. After The Muppet Show, he appeared in The Great Muppet Caper with like 2 lines of dialogue, probably. Then, jump to Manhattan. Where did he go? Well, he's not with his bandmates, but he is at the wedding, next to other since-abandoned characters like Louis Casager and J.P. Gross. Up until Muppets 2015, he'd be limited to cameo appearances. He is literally in the same shot as Nigel in Muppets 2011. So he was added late into the original show and forgot about once Frank Oz took over. So for this show to work, there'd have to be a heavy emphasis on making pre-existing characters multi-dimensional. I genuinely think the only reason the show was ever made beyond Disney Plus subscribers was to bring back a baby animal and to sell a vinyl record. But let's look at the ads for the show. Baby Groot. Grogu, aka Baby Yoda. Now, after years of research and development, Baby Animal, even though he's not new, he came out with Muppet Babies. So, this Electric Mayhem show is actually just an animal show with a few more things to do since Animal doesn't speak proper English, and that's even more creatively bankrupt. To give the show's one concept, it does take advantage of an odd trivia piece.
Say, look at this. I've been cleaning out my nest, and I found an old book of my poetry.
The fact that there's been tons of in-character Muppet albums over the years, mainly for Sesame Street, but for the Muppets as well. Examples include Rolf's solo debut, Old Brown Ears is Back, and Kermit Unpigged. But oddly, the Electric Mayhem themselves, an actual Muppet band, never got a solo album in character. So part of the show's plot is recording the debut album. The debut album in show got a physical release, which is a cool collector's item. The actual album consisting of the band's covers throughout the show and an original score for the show. This is the only time I've seen something not designed to sell toys to kids, but to sell collectibles to adults. But since it follows the extended movie format of other Disney Plus series, the total runtime of the series is 10 30-minute episodes, which is around 5 hours. 5 fucking hours of characters who aren't important. That is longer than this video, covering 60 years of content if you're watching the compilation. Now, this is actually a common criticism for most of these Disney Plus extended movie type shows, but 5 fucking hours of Muppets who aren't important. What the fuck is even supposed to happen? It is one of the most desperate things I've ever seen. There's not even enough material to work with for a Muppet movie in here. There's not even one good episode. Like, it's not quite as bad as Swamp Years or Now, but it easily pisses me off more because it's so bankrupt and questionable. There are too many human characters with too much focus because there's nothing to do with the actual main characters because it's desperate. Lily Singh plays the main human lead, and she is an atrocious actress in general. If you don't know who that is, she's an incredibly shitty comedy YouTuber. Yes, we have finally gotten to the point where the Muppets has shitty YouTubers in it. Let's look at some of her epic comedy. Now, of course, she's since left YouTube in recent years because she's an annoying bitch with zero talent, but her peak was around 2016. She has an odd emphasis on insisting that she's a bisexual woman of color.
Remember when Frank Ocean first came out? People tried to label him as a gay rapper. First of all, he's bi, not gay. And he's so hot, he's also the reason I know I'm bi, not gay. Not to mention coming to terms with being queer and being Indian.
Like, it's an awful running gag throughout her comedy acts. Like, okay, we get it, you're gay, what's the punchline? Nothing wrong with that, but what's the fucking joke? One of her more well-known reoccurring acts being The Parents, which is riddled with not malicious stereotype humor, but lazy stereotype humor.
Seriously?
Hi.
Your cousin Navi stay with her parents. Beta, you're not planning to move very far away from your family, right?
No, Auntie.
Okay, I'm sorry, but she does mad drugs, right? You do drugs.
She's just making, like, Indian jokes because she's Indian. Wow, I sure am a quirky, confused Indian girl. It's very 2010 for 2016. She does try to have social commentary sometimes, given her insistence on multiculturalism, being a Canadian Indian, and bisexual, probably for fucking clout at this point, who knows.
Disgraceful beep. What's next? Go see a doctor, you beep.
Her satirical comedy is unintentionally harmful because it's so poorly written. For example, the sketch Therapy with a Homophobic Person is riddled with stereotypes despite trying to teach tolerance, and including the homophobe having a heavy southern accent.
Look, it was Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve.
Childishly insulting the individual for their religion.
And how does it feel to get updates from God? Yeah, does God text you, or is God more of a DM person?
I just know what God intended.
And when your friend God texts you a meme, are you all like, oh my God?
Despite trying to encourage acceptance. She got a talk show which is somehow even worse than Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, James Corden, and Ellen DeGenerate. There are allegations of paid actors in her crowds to make her jokes look funnier because, they're so bad nobody's actually laughing at the shit.
You're a bisexual, Lily.
Would have made things a lot less confusing. Now, ironically, when you have sex with women, though, you don't have to worry about Hogwarts.
Lily Singh being a main human actor in this show is a desperate attempt to pander to the youth that hurts the quality drastically. Lots of humor in the show is social media oriented. Lily Singh's sister is a social media influencer.
I gotta get home and do a live stream makeover challenge.
They use Twitter for the first time. Dr. Teeth starts a YouTube channel. Animal makes TikToks. They dick ride other musicians they didn't want to spend money to actually show up. Rachel Bloom gives an atrocious performance as Sarah Swifty.
And our vengeance shall be swift.
The band plays a virtual concert in Minecraft. It's not even actual Minecraft, it's just shitty CG. They could have saved money by using actual gameplay. There are Minecraft CG videos not made by multi-billion-dollar companies made 13 years ago that look better than a show made by Disney. They don't even build brown bricks in Minecraft. The shitty CG, much like Haunted Mansion, is atrocious and overused.
Use it if you need it.
You couldn't spill a bucket of paint? That's not an expensive practical effect, it's fucking spilling paint. You could have saved money. That looks like complete shit. That is how rushed the shit is. They were unwilling to do something as basic as spill paint. The whole fucking show looks like shit if you can't tell. In fact, it looks like a fucking Marvel movie. The promotional material fits the hippie character's aesthetic very well with a bright psychedelic color palette. Actually watch the show, it's completely washed out. Like, is this fucking Auschwitz? Why is it so gray? The fan service is also very pandering to adults, so it's not good for either demographic. The musical number, Can You Picture That, from the Muppet movie reappears here, where they paint a house for no reason. It's just designed to make you nostalgic for the time they painted a car for actual narrative purpose. It's the only reason the show exists, but the team did a good job of only covering songs fitting their characters. The cover of the Beach Boys' God Only Knows is the standout, and the composition was actually very largely oriented around the instruments that the members play, so it never comes off as the fictional characters didn't play this, not breaking the illusion of an in-character album. The Muppets Mayhem was well received by fans, and I've never disagreed with a fan base more in my entire life, and I like Star Wars, so that's saying something. I am genuinely shocked people liked it. I am completely in the minority on this, but it is a completely creatively bankrupt concept, constantly and desperately trying to fulfill a 5-hour runtime, littered with lazy nostalgia bait and attempts to be hip with the kids. It's not the worst thing in the franchise, but it is easily the most unwatchable just on the basis of its boring everything and asinine runtime. There is no good Muppet movie within this. If it were cut down, it is dog shit the entire way through. Despite its positive reception, it was canceled after one season, implying that there could have been a season 2. As of writing in May 2024, this is the most recent Muppet project. But apparently, creator Adam F. Goldberg wanted to make a Muppet-verse with other Muppet shows to coincide with each other. A smaller franchise within a franchise, presumably with other spin-offs. This is comparable to what is dubbed the Mandoverse, which refers to Star Wars content that is narratively connected to The Mandalorian. And if the Muppets Mayhem becomes the first installment in a Muppet-verse, I have absolutely no hope for it.
And I hope that this show, you know, look, there's the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I want the Muppet, comedy universe.
I imagine it's only gonna get worse and more creatively bankrupt with this franchise direction. It is a motive only conceived for profit and to be hip with a cinematic universe, and it's insulting to even think of if you know anything about Muppets. The S in the Muppets has long since been a $, and their creator's goal for the moment has failed. But maybe one day, Disney will actually try, stop fucking jerking off, milking whatever they can off its fiscal inability to completely die. An inability created from decades of painstaking effort. The characters consistently being broken down further and further to nothing but its most bankable aspects. Doing nothing but practically slapping the boss that once trusted them across the face. But gratefully, the efforts that granted that immorality can always be revisited and cherished. It is without a doubt the largest franchise artistic fall from grace, and that can apply to any franchise in today's blue Hollywood. But Kermit's corpse has since been long struck in the neck, shot in the cranium, stripped of his gold, and that corpse continues to leak on the side of Disneyland. While the new boss breaks the ribcage of anyone who tries to call an ambulance for poor Kermit. And us at home, there's nothing we can do. A legacy riddled in tragedy has artistically become a tragedy in its own right.
Maybe even you can believe in